The story begins with a pink-haired girl striking rocks with a pickaxe in strength and anger, screaming questions about how long she must continue this hard labor. This girl is Lydia Ivanche, who was once a successful young woman from a marquise family but has now turned into a mere convicted prisoner in a hard labor camp. Lydia continues to work hard, realizing that people describe her as the woman who destroyed her own destiny due to her madness for a man, and she admits to herself that she was obsessed with him to the point where she could no longer distinguish between fire and water. Lydia recalls her memories with Richard, the man she loved to death, and who was the direct cause of her tragic end. She wipes the sweat from her face, bitterly blaming herself for falling in love with him simply because he comforted her when she was crying, describing herself as the biggest fool. Richard was the third prince born to a commoner mother, and he lived under the threat and surveillance of the crown prince, making him the worst marriage candidate at the time. Despite all that, and due to her naivety and excessive confidence in her family's influence, Lydia proposed to him. While everyone looked at her in astonishment, calling her crazy, she felt overwhelmed with happiness. Thanks to his engagement to Lydia, Richard managed to survive the imperial power struggle. When the crown prince ascended the throne and exercised his tyranny, Richard seized the opportunity to ignite a rebellion, which ended with him being crowned emperor amidst everyone's cheers. But the shock came when Richard abandoned Lydia and fell in love with her cousin Giselle. If it had just been love between them, Lydia might have remained silent, but their betrayal was deeper than that. Drowning in her tears and despair, Lydia decided that she must kill Giselle. Driven by blind love, she attempted to poison her, thinking that losing Giselle would be the greatest punishment for Richard. The poisoning attempt failed, and the result was Lydia's exile to the hard labor camp, where she now collapses to the ground from sheer exhaustion. She blames herself severely for not killing the traitor Richard instead of trying to kill Giselle. Lydia fears that continuous work will destroy her health and decides to rest a little. However, she is surprised by coughing up profuse amounts of blood. Lydia falls unconscious, cursing her miserable fate. After 5 years in the labor camp, Lydia was struck by a deadly plague that slowly ended her life. As her soul fades away, the tape of her life begins to play before her eyes like a movie. Lydia sees the scene of her engagement to Richard and wonders in bewilderment if these are her final moments. She feels intense shame watching herself beg him foolishly and screams, demanding this shameful scene to stop. Pain and regret squeeze Lydia's heart, wishing time would go back to that moment, so she could slap that idiot across his face. Suddenly, she hears a voice calling her name, Lydia Ivanche, only to find herself in her old, young, and clean appearance. She looks around in confusion, trying to understand what is happening, only to be shocked by seeing Richard standing in front of her, angry and screaming in her face, accusing her of smuggling poison based on a report he received. Richard confronts Lydia with a direct accusation of attempting to poison Giselle, leaving Lydia stunned as she looks at the bottle of poison in her hand, unable to comprehend what is happening. She suddenly realizes that she has traveled back in time, specifically to the moment she was arrested for attempted poisoning, and she checks the bottle in shock. Lydia wonders in denial if she has truly returned to this ominous day, and burns with anger at the bad timing, wishing she had returned at least before committing this folly. Richard screams angrily, ordering the guards to search her immediately for not answering. But Giselle interrupts him firmly, refusing to let men touch Lydia, and declaring that she will search her herself, which surprises Richard. Lydia's eyes fall on Giselle, and she sees Richard protecting Giselle behind his back, claiming fear for her and knowledge of her heart. Lydia feels intense disgust at this emotional hypocrisy she sees before her. While Giselle calls out to the Emperor anxiously, Lydia decides she has not returned to witness this farce again. Although the timing of the return is mysterious and bad, she sees it as an opportunity to correct the mistakes of the past. Lydia raises her hand and slaps her own face amidst the astonishment of Richard, who calls her name. Wondering in shock what on earth she is doing, Lydia smiles confidently, declaring to herself that she has finally regained her sanity and will not ruin her life over a man again. Richard screams, denouncing her action, and Lydia realizes that searching her will inevitably reveal the poison. She decides to cleverly turn the tables, claiming with fake tears that this poison was not to kill Giselle, but to kill herself, changing the course of the accusation. Everyone is stunned by her declaration. While Lydia thinks that self-harm is not a crime, and since rumors haunt her about her obsession with men, she will play the victim who committed suicide because her fiancé was stolen from her. Lydia imagines the scenario of her death and how it will put Richard in a huge predicament, as the cause will be deemed the lover's betrayal. People will talk about him leaving his former fiancé to die despite his indebtedness to her family, and how he will face Marquis Ivanche after that. She realizes his popularity will collapse, and he will surely try to stop her to avoid the eternal curse that will haunt him. Lydia proceeds to execute her plan by pretending to drink the poison in front of everyone. Richard orders her arrest immediately, and during the guards' rush towards her, the liquid spills. Lydia panics when she realizes that drops of the poison have entered her mouth, and she swallowed them by mistake. At that moment, the Duke bursts into the room, apologizing for his sudden entry due to receiving no response, but he freezes in place. Shocked to see the Marquise's daughter in this state, blood flows from Lydia's mouth, and her gaze turns towards the Duke in astonishment as she recognizes his features. Lydia staggers, whispering the name Arsene before falling into his arms, losing her balance, muttering his family name, Byron. Arsene's eyes widen in extreme shock as Lydia's exhausted body falls into his arms, not only because of her sudden collapse, but because she just whispered his original and secret family name, Byron. Arsene wonders to himself in bewilderment how she could know this name. At the moment, his soldiers burst into the place, calling their commander anxiously. The soldiers are amazed to see the scene and ask curiously if the young lady just called him by his first name, Arsene, letting their imaginations run wild about a secret love affair between them that was happening behind their backs. Arsene breathes a sigh of relief internally because no one heard the word Byron, and coldly denies the love rumors, ordering them to summon a doctor immediately instead of gossiping about trivial matters. Arsene stares at the unconscious Lydia's face, with one question still revolving in his mind about how this woman knew that dangerous name. Meanwhile, rumors spread like wildfire among the servants in the corridors, talking about Lydia's emotional looks at Arsene during her suicide attempt, and how he carried her himself when she fell. Gossip increases about them being secret lovers, and that this might be the real reason behind Arsene not showing any interest in women before. Arsene Edis, commander of the Black Wolf Knights and the strongest knight in the Empire, and the man who deserves the most credit for the success of Richard's rebellion. Despite the strangeness of the idea of him falling in love with the Emperor's former fiancé, the rumors did not stop while Lydia lay in her room. Arsene sits beside her inside the room, watching her with serious features, realizing that his coming here will increase the intensity of the endless rumors. He wanted to avoid attracting attention, but he found no escape from it. For him, knowing why she pronounced the name Byron and eliminating any potential threat is far more important than any rumors. The name Byron belongs to a ducal family that was executed for treason and exterminated completely. It is his real title that must never see the light, and painful childhood memories of fleeing amidst the fire resurface. Lydia's groans and feeling of cold cut off his train of thought. Arsene is surprised by the absence of servants and their lack of care for the patient in this house. Finding himself forced to care for her himself and light the fireplace to warm her, he puts his hand on his face helplessly, wondering what on earth he is doing. He came to watch and investigate her and ended up nursing her. With the warmth of the fire rising, Lydia opens her eyes slowly. She asks for water with a weak voice and a feeling of intense thirst. Arsene approaches her, asking coldly if she has woken up. Lydia is surprised by his presence in her room, while he advises her to get up slowly due to her unstable condition, and she wonders privately why this person is here. She thanks him stammeringly, so he replies with veiled sarcasm about her good luck for surviving and waking up this quickly after ingesting poison. Lydia drinks the water, thinking she survived by a miracle, as she really thought she would die from the poison immediately upon returning in time. Lydia grips the blanket tightly, determined to live her new life correctly this time because she returned from death. She sets the first rule for her new life: never obsess over men and seek powerful allies. She defines her first plan as saving the people from the hard labor camp where she suffered previously, while the second plan is revenge on Richard and Giselle, imagining herself punching Richard hard. Lydia smiles cunningly when she realizes that meeting Arsene immediately is an incredible stroke of luck, as he is the person she needs to achieve her goals. She feigns innocence and asks him why he is there, while internally planning to exploit her knowledge of his benefactor's presence in the labor camp to persuade him or threaten him with his dangerous secret if he refuses to cooperate. Arsene asks Lydia seriously if she remembers what happened yesterday, so she feigns ignorance, asking in surprise. But he confronts her directly with the fact that she called him Byron, which causes her shock and astonishment. Lydia tries to salvage the situation with a tense smile, claiming she might not have said that, or that he misheard. But Arsene cuts off her doubt with certainty, confirming he heard her clearly and that he stayed awake all night looking for a reason for that. He stares at her with sharp and piercing looks, demanding an explanation for calling him Arsene Byron. Lydia is internally agitated and pulls her hair nervously, Realizing that trying to cover it up with a lie will only break his trust in her, she decides to risk telling the truth and asks him hesitantly if he would believe her if she told him the truth, to which he replies coldly that he will decide that after listening to her first. Lydia agrees and takes a deep breath, and while asking him not to be shocked by what will happen, he prepares to hear what she has. Lydia drops the bombshell, saying that she actually died and then traveled back in time to the past. She explains to him that she learned about his true identity and life details during her previous life, leaving Arson in a state of shock and disbelief. Arson looks at her uncomprehendingly, unable to believe the story of death and return to life, wondering what she is saying. He concludes that she is still delirious and hasn't fully recovered from the poison's effect, so he decides to leave and visit her after a few days so she can rest. Lydia screams in panic, trying to stop him, confirming that her words are not the ravings of a sick person. She throws her winning card to prove her sincerity, saying she knows the whereabouts of Byron and Nilla, causing Arsène to freeze in place immediately upon hearing the names. He turns to her sharply, asking what she just said. Lydia continues revealing precise details, identifying them as his writing tutor and his nanny. Lydia explains to the shocked Arsène that in her previous life, she was imprisoned with them in a labor camp in the East, where they told her they were arrested for helping Arson and his mother escape. She asks him now seriously if he is ready to hear her story, confirming she doesn't care if he thinks she's crazy, as all she wants is to convince him and borrow his strength. Lydia conjures up images of Byron, Nilla, and Maria in her mind, realizing this is the only way to save these people. She describes them as the benefactors who helped her endure 5 years of torment in the hard labor camp. She goes back in her memory to the painful past, where she was broken after her fiancé's betrayal and her family's abandonment, and how help reached her from these strangers. She remembers her screaming and hysterical anger in the camp, and how she lamented her luck that the traitor became emperor thanks to her while she rotted in prison. While she was kicking things and despairingly wishing for death, Nilla scolded her gently for saying such terrible things. Nilla offered her bread, advising her to stop crying and eat, because this harsh life is still better than death. Maria, the redhead, comforted her, asking her to forget that man and pull herself together. Lydia remembers how she ate the bread with tears streaming from her eyes, touched by their kindness. She recalls memories of sharing food, work, and smiles, and how they were the main reason she stayed alive, so she firmly resolves to save them from that fate this time. Returning to the present, she tells Arsène the tragic end, where they decided to escape in the 5th year, but everyone died due to an epidemic that broke out in winter. She challenges Arsène's doubts, saying that if he finds it hard to believe her words, he should send someone to the east to verify. She concludes her speech with crucial information to prove her honesty, revealing the existence of a hidden magic stone mine in that place. Lydia thought her words were enough to convince him, but the expressions on Arsène's face suggested pity rather than belief, as he smiled nervously. He told her quietly that he understands her great shock due to the broken engagement, making Lydia realize with astonishment that he doesn't believe a word she said and considers her delirious. She tried to stop him, begging him to listen to her a little longer, but he rudely used the excuse of detaining a sick person, promising to visit her after her recovery while she tried to stop him. Lydia screamed, trying to prevent him from leaving, but he was determined to withdraw. A servant interrupted them, conveying an invitation from the young master for dinner, giving Arsène the perfect opportunity to escape. Arsène apologized, claiming an emergency, and left the room hurriedly, leaving Lydia behind. As he walked down the hallway, he tried to convince himself that her words were just madness resulting from shock. But her precise knowledge of the details of Nilla and Byron made him stop in confusion and deep thought. Despite feeling that he was drifting along with nonsense, he decided to investigate the matter just in case. He remembered Lydia's miserable appearance and how neglected she looked in her family's home, which caught his attention and made him feel pity for her miserable state. Elsewhere, Devon asked the head butler if Arsène had refused dinner and left, and the servant confirmed it. Devon was surprised, as he thought Arsène staying in Lydia's room all day meant something else, but it seems he was wrong. The old head butler intervened, hinting at confirmed feelings Arsène has for Lydia. He described how Arsène carried her in his arms with anxious looks, painting a distorted romantic picture of reality. The servant confirmed that those looks only come from a man who adores a woman and fears for her intensely. Devon listened with interest, acknowledging that something like this had never happened between Lydia and Arsène before, and the servant assured him that his eyes were not deceiving him. Devon admitted to himself that he had thought of letting her die because she brought shame to the family, but the situation has changed now. He smiled slyly, wondering how his foolish sister managed to snare Arsène. Accordingly, he issued orders to put Lydia under house arrest and take good care of her, admitting she has good taste in men. A full week passed since the alleged suicide incident, during which Lydia regained her health while planning her next steps. She made plans including the possibility of Arson helping her or not, but the problem lies in the complete lack of news from him. Lydia realizes she needs an ally to save the people in the East as soon as possible, even if Arson doesn't help her. Lydia decides not to wait any longer and gets up, determined to demand Devon lift her house arrest and meet Arson herself. She opens the door to be surprised by Devon standing directly in front of her, cutting off her words. Devon tells her coldly that she came at the right time, as the Emperor has arranged a new marriage for her. Lydia is shocked to learn that the groom is Count Mond. She screams in his face, disbelieving that he wants to marry her off immediately to an old man the age of her grandfather who has grandchildren. Devon explains indifferently that this offer is from her former fiancé, the Emperor, and she must accept it. He then concludes his speech with a veiled threat and a malicious smile, telling her that if she doesn't like this marriage, she must make sure to secure Arson and make him hers. Lydia's eyes widen in extreme shock, unable to comprehend what she is hearing. Devon smiles slyly as he gives her the choice between marrying the old man or ensuring Arson's loyalty, leaving her confused. Lydia suddenly realizes that everything that happened was planned, and Devon's alleged kindness was nothing but a means to exploit her to get to Arson. She feels intense anger at the audacity of Richard, who is trying to marry her off to an old man for fear she might marry Arson and threaten him. Lydia grips the letter tightly, realizing that this humiliating and infuriating situation was somewhat expected. Lydia decides with determination that she will not allow anyone to control her destiny. If everyone wants to manipulate her through marriage, she will become someone no one can marry and leave Arson alone. She imagines happily how she will ruin Richard and Devon's plans together, as she won't be able to marry if they stay together. And even if they don't marry, what will happen to each other? Lydia decides to resort to Plan B, Plan D, which is to become a priestess. She realizes this path is often taken by nobles who cause social scandals, and it prevents her from employing servants or dating due to the vow of chastity. Lydia doesn't care about these restrictions. She got used to hard labor in the work camp, and manual labor won't be a problem for her. She also has already decided to live chastely and stay away from men completely, so she has no problem with the vow of chastity. She remembers Richard's betrayal with her cousin and feels disgusted by the idea of dating and men in general. She screams angrily, declaring her hatred for all men. Night falls, and Lydia decides to escape. She sneaks out barefoot cautiously, expecting guards at the door to stop her from leaving. She cleverly decides to exit from the window instead of the door. She ties bed sheets together to make a rope and descends with it to the garden. Below, Arson sneaks through the Marquise's garden, realizing the danger of his position if caught. He knows his official visit would cause an uproar, so he had no choice but to sneak in. His first goal is to meet Lydia quickly, as he confirmed the truth of her words after sending someone to the eastern region and confirming the existence of the labor camp there. He feels anxious because he cannot send a letter due to watching eyes, so sneaking was his only option. Arson arrives below Lydia's balcony, determined to get a full explanation from her today. Suddenly, he freezes in shock when he sees Lydia dangling from the balcony. Lydia screams in terror, realizing she forgot that her current body is much weaker than the body accustomed to hard labor. Arson calls out to her from below, and she looks at him in astonishment. Arson looks at her in shock, asking what she is doing in this place. Lydia swings in the air, and Arson asks her in confusion what kind of trouble she has gotten herself into this time. Lydia's hand begins to let go of the rope gradually, complaining that the explanation will take too long. Arson asks her to jump, promising to catch her. Lydia hesitates for a moment, but he reassures her with a confident look, asking her to trust him, so she closes her eyes and jumps. Arson catches Lydia firmly, wondering to himself about her noticeable light weight. Arson wonders to himself if Devon really starved her to become this weight. Their silence is broken by Lydia's shy voice. Arson asks her to endure a little even if the situation is uncomfortable, while she wonders what he means by that. Suddenly, Arson lifts her in his arms, so Lydia screams in embarrassment due to her light clothes, asking him to put her down for a moment. Arson stops hesitantly, so Lydia repeats her request to put her down on the ground, surprised by his hesitation. She thinks to herself that her request isn't hard, but he doesn't execute it. Lydia suddenly realizes the misunderstanding. He thought she was asking him to pull down her skirt himself. She blushes, realizing the awkward situation, while Arson continues to carry her silently. She feels his hand touching her bare skin, which increases her confusion and tension. This awkward situation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of servants, and she warns Arson that someone is coming, so he rushes to escape, carrying her away from the servant's sight. One of the servants wonders as they search for her why she is wandering alone at this late time. Arson continues to carry her across the garden while Lydia watches his serious features, then he gently places her on the ground. Arson finally realizes what she meant by asking him to put her down, and his face turns red from embarrassment at his misunderstanding. Arson feels relieved by the darkness of the night covering the situation, but he remains tense. He suddenly asks her to get on his back, and Lydia is surprised by his sudden request. He explains that he will get her out of the Marquise's palace as she was trying, because he knows she was trying to escape. Lydia agrees reluctantly, despite feeling embarrassed about riding on his back in sleepwear, but she realizes that following him is the surest way out. Arsène warns her against falling, confirming he won't take responsibility, but she reassures him of the strength of her arms. Arsène sets off at an amazing speed, astonishing Lydia, who wonders if this is normal human speed. He jumps over fences lightly while carrying her, increasing her amazement. Arsène asks her not to scream, confident in her ability to control herself. Lydia wonders why he warned her, only to be surprised by him jumping from a great height. Lydia screams in terror as she sees the ground approaching fast. Arsène lands skillfully and asks her coldly if she plans to choke him, and Lydia denies it while shivering. She asks Arsène why he sneaked in like this. Arsène explains to her that if he entered officially, strange rumors would spread. He tells Lydia that rumors are already spreading just by carrying her to the palace, so Lydia asks him to take her to the temple. Arsène refuses her request firmly, shocking her. He reminds her that she claimed to know him in her previous life, but it seems she doesn't know him as well as she claims. Arsène smiles slyly as he tightens his horse's reins, asserting that he doesn't let someone who knows his secret escape easily. Arsène remembers his mother's words, warning him against trusting anyone and the necessity of hiding his true identity. Arsène recalls the last words his mother said to him while he stood in his room. His memory goes back to his 9th birthday, when his entire family was falsely accused of treason by the late Emperor Byron, leading to the death of his grandfather and father amidst the fire. No one survived that massacre except a few family members, including his mother and him. They fled through the snow, accompanied by Byron, Arsène's tutor, and the nanny Nilla. After severe suffering, they took refuge in the border regions of the Marquis, where Brahmin Edis, his father's close friend, lived. But the tragedy didn't stop, as his mother soon died too, leaving him alone. Thus, he adopted the name Arsène Edis. Her final will echoes in his mind, tears streaming from his eyes, not to trust anyone, so he answers her with a voice choked with the promise. Arsène returns to the present, confirming to himself that he doesn't trust people easily, not even a weak woman who couldn't leave a scratch on him. Meanwhile, Lydia asks nervously while looking around if what is happening is a kidnapping operation, and Arsène answers her coldly in the affirmative. He wraps her in a large, comfortable piece of cloth to restrict her movement, and Lydia exclaims in astonishment at this strange method of restraint. Arsène tells her rigidly that it is better for her to stay still, as there is no one here to help her. Lydia looks at him anxiously and asks if he will kill her if she causes a commotion. He answers with a sharp and brief look, if necessary. Lydia smiles cleverly despite the situation, deducing from his actions that he has indeed located the labor camp. Arsène acknowledges this with serious features, confirming he verified the fate of his tutor and nanny. Lydia expresses her happiness at this, but Arsène interrupts her joy coldly, explaining that this means the information she possesses is no longer useful to him. She looks at him with a meaningful look, hinting that he still needs her information. Lydia laughs with sudden confidence and tells him he will need her if he wishes to obtain the Marquise's borderland. Arsène replies confidently that the land has already been promised to him by the young Marquis Devon and the Emperor. Lydia looks at him with pity and tells him with a sarcastic smile that he is surprisingly naive. Arsène is struck by astonishment and shock at being called naive. Lydia continues her logical speech, wondering sarcastically if he really believes that the person who abandoned his fiancée easily will keep a promise made to him. Lydia realizes within herself that she is not lying. In fact, he never obtained that land in his previous life until the day of his death. Lydia explains that the young Viscount won't give up the land for free once he knows Arsène's desire for it, and that Devon wants to keep Arsène under his control. She proposes a bold idea. If he marries her, that land could be given as a dowry to him. Arsène is confused by the proposal, but Lydia reassures him quickly, saying she doesn't plan to ask to marry him either. She places her hand on her chest seriously and asks him for help, promising she will help him in return. Arsène looks at her suspiciously as he tightens the bindings, wondering how she intends to help him when he is the person who knows her secret and won't let her escape easily. Lydia reveals her plan with a cunning smile, saying she will first cure her father's illness, which is believed to be incurable, to bring him to her side, as Devon has seized power since the father fell ill. Arsène asks Lydia how she will do that, and she replies immediately that it is a trade secret. Arsène looks at her with question marks on his face, unable to comprehend her overconfidence. Lydia continues her speech logically, wondering why she would reveal sensitive and free information to someone who just threatened to kill her. Arsène questions her method of making deals, and when she mentions again that she will use knowledge of the future, Arsène looks at her with boredom, considering it nonsense. But Lydia interrupts him firmly, pointing out that since he found the labor camp already, it is time for him to believe her words. Arson stares at her silently, realizing her words carry a logic that cannot be denied despite their strangeness. She knows his identity clearly and doesn't seem to intend to expose it. He thinks of the current emperor who carries the blood of the late emperor, making trusting anyone almost impossible. He sees that holding on to an unspecified promise is foolishness. He looks at Lydia, assessing her. She is not entirely trustworthy in his eyes, especially after the rumors of her ridiculous suicide attempt. Arson decides in the end that keeping her close to monitor her is better than doing nothing, so he asks her what she wants from him. Lydia requests enthusiastically that he take her to the Marquis' border after saving the people from the labor camp. Suddenly, she remembers something important and tells him it is necessary to visit the temple before that, so Arson asks her sarcastically if she plans to confess her sins. Lydia looks at him with feigned astonishment, wondering if she looks like someone who needs to confess. Lydia drops another surprise, announcing she will become a priestess. Arson looks at her in shock, unable to believe that someone who refuses even to confess her sins wants to take the path of priesthood. Lydia explains quickly that it is just a disguise to avoid the forced marriage chasing her. Arson understands the situation and agrees to accompany her to the temple tomorrow. Lydia smiles in relief, expressing her reliance on him for this mission. Suddenly, Arson tries to wrap the blanket around her, so Lydia reminds him that they are on the same side and there is no need for restraints. But he looks away and alerts her seriously to think about what she is wearing. Lydia looks at herself in surprise and answers innocently that she is wearing sleepwear, so Arson confirms that with a meaningful look. He explains to her that there are no suitable women's clothes in the knight's quarters, and he will bring her something in the morning, asking her to sleep here for tonight. Lydia wonders in amazement if he means sleeping in his own bedroom, and he confirms that. She laughs nervously, saying she can't kick out the owner of the room and suggests going to the guest room. Arson grabs her shoulder, stopping her, and tells her coldly that there is no guest room, and she must sleep here. An awkward silence prevails between them, and Lydia wonders shyly if they will sleep together in the same place. Arson looks at her sharply, asking if she is asking this question seriously. Lydia gets confused and tries to salvage the situation, saying she didn't mean anything bad, but having one bed might open room for possibilities. Then she laughs very nervously, trying to reassure herself, saying she knows nothing will happen and he won't do anything to her. Arson advises Lydia on the necessity of being cautious and developing her sense of security a little. While she looks at him in surprise, he approaches her suddenly, cornering her on the bed. He whispers to her seriously that it seems she doesn't see him as a man. Otherwise, she wouldn't be this relaxed in front of him. He asks her how she can be completely confident that he harbors no dishonorable intentions towards her in a situation like this. Lydia remembers Richard's cruel words that no man in the world would desire a woman like her. So her features change to sadness and brokenness, and she lowers her gaze. She realizes she went too far in joking with him and caused hurt to his feelings. So Arson gets confused by her reaction. She apologizes to him immediately, explaining she didn't mean to anger him. Arson wonders to himself in confusion what the Emperor told his former fiancée to make her lose confidence in herself and think she is unwanted. And he explains to her that he wasn't blaming her, but rather trying to warn her in advance of any possibilities that might expose her to danger. Arson decides to leave to let her rest a little, but as soon as silence prevails, a loud growling sound emits from Lydia's stomach, causing her face to turn extremely red with embarrassment. Lydia thinks Arson will handle her nobly and ignore the sound, but Arson returns to ask if she is hungry. Lydia denies it strongly, but her stomach betrays her again with a louder sound, putting her in a very awkward position. Lydia eats the food he brought with great appetite and overwhelming happiness. Arson watches her eat as her cheeks flush, thinking with regret that her family might not have been feeding her well for her to feel this hunger, even though she still thinks she was only neglected. Arson notices that the way she chews food reminds him of something. He mutters the word rabbit, so Lydia stops, wondering if he means the soup is made of rabbits. Arson clarifies that she resembles a winter rabbit when she eats. He explains to her that it is a northern animal with pink fur that lives in the forests, and she will see it often if she goes to the border. Lydia imagines the shape of the cute pink rabbit happily, while Arson looks at her seriously, thinking that raising someone like her might be a difficult task. In the Imperial Palace, the doctor confirms to Giselle that her baby is healthy, but Emperor Richard seems distracted and uninterested in what is being said. Empress Giselle notices his distraction, so he apologizes, saying he was annoyed by Arson and Lydia's relationship, so she asks him if he still harbors feelings for his former fiancée. Richard denies that coldly, explaining that what matters to him is Arson joining his side. He places his hand on her stomach, revealing his desire to keep Arson tied down in the capital by any means to be his bodyguard. Richard expresses his concern that Arsene and Lydia's marriage would pose a great danger to him. To solve this dilemma, Giselle decides she will pay a visit to the Marquis's house herself. She plans to understand the situation and control it by meeting Devon directly, while Giselle smiles cunningly. Lydia wakes up the next morning, rubbing her eyes sleepily, wondering in surprise if the person knocking on her door is Arsene. Another knight appears before her, making Lydia wonder in astonishment about his true identity. The knight coldly tells her that someone is asking for her outside, so Lydia thanks him as she receives the clothes from him. Lydia notices his sharp and scary gaze and wonders inwardly about the reason he is staring at her like that. The knight tells her sternly that the knight commander is not a suitable partner for a young lady like her, and advises her to abandon any romantic thoughts if she is thinking of such a thing. Lydia is stunned and shocked by his sudden words, wondering what on earth he means. The knight continues his mockery, saying she would be better off returning to the emperor, and asks her sarcastically if she hasn't married yet. Lydia feels intense anger at his rudeness, thinking to herself that this man is extremely rude for their first meeting. Lydia angrily asks him for his name, and he answers arrogantly that even if he told her, she would forget it immediately, and that hearing the name of lowly scum like him would only pollute her ears. Lydia becomes extremely angry and screams, wondering what kind of provoking person this is. Suddenly, fire ignites around Lydia in her imagination from the intensity of her anger, while Arsene looks at her wondering why she is staring at the empty hallway. Lydia realizes that Arsene has heard her and hesitates to expose the knight. She changes her mind and decides to say nothing, because they will head to the border together after finishing at the temple, to avoid any awkward situations between them. But she asks Arsene about the reason for his presence here. Arsene tells her that he sent someone to the Marquis's palace last night, and that they must hurry to the temple, so Lydia agrees. Lydia arrives at the temple early in the morning, which surprises the priests. Lydia offers her greetings to the high priest and announces with feigned reverence that she has come to dedicate her life to the goddess Anastas as a loyal servant. The high priest looks at her suspiciously, realizing that making her a priestess would harm the temple's reputation. Lydia continues her dramatic acting, claiming that the goddess made her realize the futility of her life and guided her towards asceticism. The priest thinks about rejecting her, but Lydia takes out a book and announces her desire to offer her body to serve the goddess. The priest is shocked when he sees the book. Lydia smiles slyly as she opens the book, which contains a huge financial bribe, declaring that it is a literal bribe to become a priestess. The priest coughs nervously and accepts the bribe, saying that the goddess is merciful and does not reject any sincerity. The priest asks her if she knows about the necessity of a witness for the vow of chastity, and Lydia answers confidently that she has prepared everything and that the witness will arrive soon. The priest assures her that not just anyone can be a witness, but they must be qualified for it. Lydia smiles confidently, announcing that today's witness will be someone special. At that moment, the future Empress Giselle enters the temple. The previous night, Lydia had handed a letter to Arsene and asked him for a favor. She asked him to deliver the letter to Ellis at Baron Melbourne's mansion. The letter was a fake invitation asking Giselle to come to the central temple tomorrow morning, ensuring their presence as witnesses to her vow. Arsene asks Lydia seriously if she thinks the Empress will really come, and Lydia answers with complete confidence that she will definitely come. She explains to him that Giselle desperately needs to register her marriage in the Avanche family registry before the national wedding, because she is considered a distant orphan, and no different from commoners in the eyes of the nobles, and Richard suffers from an inferiority complex due to his mother's commoner origins. She adds that her father, the Marquis, is sick and unable to make decisions, so Giselle needs Lydia's approval to enter the family registry. Lydia confirms confidently that Giselle will come without fail, and suddenly the door opens and Giselle appears in full elegance, while Lydia stands facing her. Giselle thanks Lydia with a cunning smile for her invitation, noting sarcastically that Lydia has chosen a difficult path. Lydia responds with a bright and fake smile, expressing her gratitude for Giselle's arrival. Lydia asks Giselle if she should use formal language now, and Giselle replies with a categorical negative. Giselle explains that she does not intend to act superior, and that there is no need for formalities between sisters. Giselle looks at her suspiciously, wondering to herself if Lydia really intends to become a priestess, which means there is nothing between her and Arsene. Lydia decides to be frank and tells Giselle that she will not stop her from using the family name, but in return, she will not genuinely accept her as a family member. Giselle smiles coldly and tells her that this is quite enough for her. The priestess appointment ceremony ends smoothly under the supervision of the high priest, but a problem appears suddenly. Later, Devon shouts at Lydia, asking her in shock what she intends to do and if she will really become a priestess. Lydia confirms her decision coldly, announcing that she will live according to the goddess's teachings from now on. Devon mocks her words, but she cuts him off and tells him that she is going with Arsene to the border to build a temple there. Devin is shocked when he hears this and asks her if Arson agreed to that. Arson confirms his agreement to serve Lydia and accompany her. Devin is astounded, unable to believe that Arson will take Lydia the priestess with him to the border. Devin starts to suspect hidden feelings between them, wondering if Arson loves Lydia even though she has no feelings for him. Devin agrees reluctantly, saying he has no reason to object as long as Arson agreed. Lydia smiles with overwhelming happiness, while Devin thinks that she can leave the priesthood later, and that the important thing now is for Lydia and Arson to fall in love. Devin smiles slyly, anticipating that Lydia will rely on Arson once she faces the difficulties of life at the border. Suddenly, Devin warns her in a threatening tone against taking anything from the palace with her, which shocks Lydia. Devin tells her coldly that she is a priestess now and must live an ascetic life, so she should settle for some simple clothes. Devin stands up, leaving Lydia boiling with anger and calling him despicable. Devin invites Arson for tea, so Arson tries to refuse, but Devin insists. Devin apologizes to Arson for his previous harshness and asks him curiously when he became close to Lydia. Arson denies their closeness, explaining that he saw it as good to build a temple at the border where there isn't one. Devin drinks tea while thinking sarcastically about Arson's excessive seriousness. Then he suddenly asks him with a malicious smile about his opinion on his sister Lydia's beauty. Devin warns Arson that Lydia might be exposed to unwanted flirting abroad, asking him to take good care of her. Devin smiles slyly, suggesting to Arson that he be the first to comfort her if she feels lonely, wondering who else she would rely on. Arson replies that he might be misunderstood if anyone heard him say this. Devin laughs loudly, describing Arson as a noble man and expressing his admiration for him for this reason. Arson watches Devin silently, realizing that this man is practically selling his sister instead of worrying about her. Arson wonders to himself if the young Marquis was always this ambitious and greedy. He knew of his ambition, but didn't expect it to reach this level of depravity. Arson remembers that Devin fought alongside the current emperor during the coup, which made him think he was a decent person to some extent. But he realizes now that Lydia was right about at least one thing, which is that Devin won't give up the borderland easily if he knew of Arson's desire for it. Devin smiles triumphantly, while Arson thinks that this man is ready to break promises for his greed and wants to keep Arson under his control, whatever the cost. Arson decides to leave immediately to prepare for departure, leaving Devin. Devin asks him about his departure date, and Arson answers coldly that he will leave in 2 days. Devin laughs sarcastically, noting that Lydia will leave without attending the national wedding, considering this better for her to avoid seeing that mess. Arson bids farewell to Devin with a formal bow and leaves the room, then meets Lydia outside. Lydia catches up with Arson and asks him eagerly if he is leaving now, and he confirms it. Lydia bids farewell to Arson, setting a time to meet in 2 days. Arson asks Lydia if she intends to stay in a place like this, pointing to the palace. Lydia wonders what he means and answers innocently that she needs to pack her luggage too. Arson explains to her that if it's just a few clothes, she can pack them now and go with him immediately. Lydia approaches him and whispers that there is something important she must do first. Lydia smiles happily, thinking about leaving Devin waiting, and decides to leave quietly, but not with just her clothes if he intends to play dirty. Lydia sneaks barefoot through the palace at night, remembering that her father might be at the main lord's castle, but his treasures are still hidden here. Lydia announces to herself enthusiastically that she is going to raid her father's secret safe now. Lydia remembers that her father personally taught her how to use the safe in emergencies and starts searching for the safe hidden under his name. But she is surprised by something beside her on the floor. Lydia wonders, in astonishment, if Devin has hidden something here. Her eyes fall on a coffin bearing her father's name, Kaloi Ivanche, and she is terrified. Lydia screams in her mind, wondering why there is a coffin for her father when he is still alive and well. Lydia realizes the madness of Devin, who prepared a coffin for his father while he is still fighting illness. Lydia remembers her father with sadness, admitting that although he was a bad husband, he was a good father. She recalls her childhood memories with her father and Devin, and how the father always supported them. Lydia remembers how her father supported their reckless decisions, like her request to marry the third prince and supporting Devin's rebellion, and realizes that her father put family above everything. Lydia overcomes the shock of seeing the coffin, addressing Devin in her secret thoughts with defiance that this coffin will never be used no matter what he does. She starts searching among the books lined up on the shelves and reaches behind the huge volumes to find a small wooden box hidden carefully, so she smiles, saying to herself that she finally found it. Lydia opens the box and her eyes sparkle upon seeing the large amount of diamonds inside, realizing that this is what her father spoke about. Time takes her back for a moment to a memory with her father right after the success of the rebellion, and before she left the capital, when he told her about this safe and that she could use its contents if she needed to at any time. Lydia feels a lump in her throat as she realizes that her father knew she was completely bankrupt after selling everything she owned to support Richard. She closes the box firmly, promising her father that she will use this wealth well this time. And as she holds a small needle, she renews her vow to herself and her father, asking him to wait just a little longer, because she will definitely save him. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Richard scolds Arson for his decision to go to the countryside without even attending his wedding, expressing his hurt feelings, so Arson apologizes coldly. Richard asks him to confirm what he heard about taking Lydia with him, and Arson confirms the news, justifying it by saying he saw that having a temple on the border would be useful. Richard smiles, thinking that Lydia has just become a priestess and nothing will happen for a while. But he realizes that priesthood is a job one can resign from at any time, meaning if the two fall in love, Lydia might leave her position immediately. Richard warns Arson, saying he respects his intentions, but he must be careful of Lydia. Arson misunderstands the warning as a physical threat, so he asks him confidently if he thinks he might lose if he fought the young lady. Richard laughs, explaining that is not what he meant, but rather that woman is unstable and crazy, warning him against getting involved with her. Richard thinks anxiously that the Avanche family already possesses great power compared to him as a new emperor, and if they acquire Arson and the Black Wolf Knights too, it would be a dangerous threat. Richard decides to himself that he must prevent the union of Arson and Lydia at any cost. Arson interrupts him impassively, explaining that His Majesty misunderstands, as there is no relationship between him and Lady Lydia, and he does not intend to establish one. Richard presses him, asking if he really harbors no feelings for her, so Arson swears on his sword that he does not. Richard relaxes, saying he assumed so, adding rudely that there is no reason for him to care about damaged goods. Arson's expression changes to extreme annoyance at Richard's description of his former fiancée with this insulting title, thinking that he is very harsh in speaking about her. Richard changes the subject, talking about the remnants of the previous emperor's forces, and that Viscount Herbon should not have been left alive. Arson leaves the palace thinking about the young Marquis Devon and now the emperor, wondering with distress why everyone treats that young lady with such cruelty. 2 days later, Lydia comes out of the palace with a bright smile to greet Arson. Arson notices her pale face and asks her anxiously if she is ready to leave because she doesn't look well, and she answers that she is fine and just a little tired. Arson looks sharply at Devon sitting in the back, wondering to himself if he mistreated her again, while Lydia asks Devon for permission to leave. Devon stops her with a cold smile, asking her to wait to sign the approval form for Giselle's adoption before she leaves. Lydia signs the paper quickly to get this over with, while Devon comments sarcastically on the loaded carriage behind her, noting that he told her to pack only a few clothes, but her luggage seems to be too much. Lydia's eyes widen in shock as she sees her bag fall and its contents scatter in front of everyone. She screams Devon's name, while Devon takes her underwear out of the bag, putting everyone in an embarrassing situation. Arson turns his face away, trying to ignore the scene and avoid looking. Lydia scolds Devon, wondering what on earth he is doing, and tells him that even a priestess needs to wear underwear, describing what he did as excessive. Devon looks at the bag with suspicion, having thought she might have hidden something valuable inside. But he discovers that she packed only clothes, as she said, while Lydia stands before him boiling with anger and embarrassment. Devon realizes his mistake in suspecting her, so he tells her coldly that he was mistaken and allows her to leave now. Lydia glares at her brother with a sharp look full of anger, then turns to Arson, asking him to leave immediately. Silence prevails between them later as Arson notices Lydia's extreme annoyance after the insult she suffered. Arson breaks the silence, noting that she is still holding the bag very carefully the whole way, and suggests she put it aside to rest. Lydia refuses immediately and categorically, hugging the bag tightly and telling him that her expensive underwear is inside. She smiles slyly and whispers to him that they are not just ordinary clothes but are covered in diamonds. Lydia explains that she expected a thorough luggage inspection, so she used her sewing skills, which she acquired and became proficient in at the labor camps in her previous life. She undid the lining of the underwear and embroidered the diamonds inside skillfully, so that no one could imagine a fortune hidden there. Arson asks her about the cost of her underwear. Lydia offers Arson enthusiastically and spontaneously if he wants to see it himself, saying they are special pieces. Arson blushes and yells at her, denying being a pervert, and seriously asks her to stop making lewd jokes and act with dignity befitting a priestess. Lydia complains in boredom, describing him as extremely uptight. Lydia changes the subject, asking how long he will continue calling her my lady. Arson tells her he calls her Priestess Lydia. She tells him he can just call her Lydia, but he insists nervously on the title Priestess Lydia as sufficient. Lydia asks him about the remaining time to reach the inn after leaving the capital. Arson tells her they will arrive by evening, and from there, they will sneak away together from the group to head to the Eastern labor camp. Arson warns her seriously that the journey will be extremely arduous and exhausting because they need to save the people and return before the procession reaches its destination, and asks her if she is really sure about wanting to go. Lydia smiles confidently, reassuring him that she will be fine and there is no need to worry. She tells herself that the difficulty does not matter. The important thing is to save the people who suffered with her in the labor camp. She remembers their faces and promises them secretly to wait a little longer because she is coming for them. The carriage sets off through the green forest, carrying Lydia's great hope with it. After arriving at the inn, Arson and Lydia head east with a few followers, where Arson introduces her to the merchant Milan. Arson explains the plan that they will disguise themselves as members of Milan's merchant group to enter the Count's lands where the labor camp is located, and Lydia welcomes Mr. Milan with a smile. Arson introduces his assistant, Cedric, to her, who bows respectfully. Lydia's features brighten upon seeing him, as she remembers him from her previous life as an extremely kind person, and welcomes him warmly. Cedric expresses his surprise at Lydia remembering his family name, noting jokingly that he doesn't just remember people by their family names like she does. Suddenly, Cedric calls his companion Randall, which surprises Lydia, who recognizes the intended person immediately. Cedric apologizes to Lydia for Randall's behavior, explaining that this companion's personality has been difficult and complex from the start, so Lydia responds with a nervous and polite laugh. Lydia keeps her smile outwardly, convincing herself that she has to endure this time only to avoid causing unnecessary trouble. But she burns with anger inside, feeling that this endurance she thought would be for one time has become endless. Lydia recalls Randall's provoking behavior throughout the journey before they arrived in the East, where he would pick fights for no reason and give her sharp looks whenever she talked to Sir Arson. Lydia trembles with rage, wondering why he treats her so hostilely since their last meeting. Arson notices Randall's frowning face and comments jokingly that he seems to complain a lot since yesterday. Randall replies coldly, saying that if it weren't for that woman, he wouldn't have any complaints, which shocks Lydia and makes her boil with anger. Cedric slaps Randall's back hard and friendly, describing him as a brat and appreciating his effort, while Randall looks at him sharply asking why he hit him. Cedric drags Randall away while Lydia watches them in confusion. Arson asks her if something happened between her and Randall for him to harbor all this hatred for her, and Lydia replies that she simply doesn't please him. Lydia starts analyzing their relationship and wonders naively if Randall is Arson's guardian, or perhaps a romantic relationship brings them together. Suddenly, Lydia's eyes widen in shock as if she realized something dangerous, and she says to herself, "Wait, don't tell me that." She looks at Arson and thinks deep down that despite everything, he is really handsome. She starts connecting the dots, wondering how such a handsome person doesn't have a single female scandal until now. Lydia imagines the large number of women in the capital who must have tried to get close to him and do something with him. She concludes that Arson might have been repelling the women who approached him in the same rude way he treats her now. Arson notices her staring and deep thinking, so he cuts her train of thought coldly, saying that he doesn't know what she is thinking, but she better not. So Lydia just hums. Lydia imagines a romantic scenario between the two men, but Arson reads her thoughts clearly and yells at her, denying it categorically and frighteningly. Lydia feels suspicious and wonders to herself if that's not the case. Then why does he act with her in this strange way? In the evening, inside an inn near the Eastern labor camp, Cedric repeats his apology to Lydia for her discomfort due to Randall's bratty behavior. Cedric asks her to understand the situation because Randall has special circumstances. So Lydia asks curiously what kind of circumstances make him act with such rudeness. Cedric starts explaining, saying that most knights in their order come from mercenary backgrounds or commoners. He reminds her that they obtained the title of knights thanks to their merit in the success of the counter-coup. Cedric reveals the shocking truth, which is that Randall comes from a slave background. He explains that although he obtained the title of knight, he did not get a family name. Lydia listens in astonishment, wondering if the reason for his behavior is his feeling of inferiority for being a knight in name only. Cedric smiles with a subtle reproach and tells her that he doesn't know if she remembers, but he once suggested after the victory and while they were heading to the capital that Randall be her escort knight. Cedric mimics Lydia's tone in the past, reminding her of her harsh reply when she said, "How can a slave be a knight?" These words fall like a thunderbolt on Lydia, whose features pale and whispers in shock, "Oh my God," realizing that she is the reason for his hatred of her. Lydia drowns in a vortex of painful memories admitting to herself that she was in the past an aristocrat in the negative and detestable sense of the word, as the echo of her mocking voice resonates in her mind, asking, "How can a slave be a knight?" She relives the feelings of vanity that possessed her then, driven by the illusion of her imminent marriage to Richard and her transformation into a member of the royal family. Hearing herself ordered to bring a real knight instead of that slave, cold sweat drips on her pale face, and she realizes, even if very late, the magnitude of the grave offense she committed against this man. Lydia sits alone, blaming herself bitterly for having the audacity to be annoyed by his dry treatment, forgetting completely that she was the one who started the harm and the wound in the first place. In the midst of the dark room's silence, she wonders sorrowfully if this is the real reason for her going back in time, to be given a chance to live her life correctly and correct those fatal mistakes. She tries to salvage the situation in front of Cedric, thanking him with a forced smile for telling her that truth, admitting that without him, she might have committed a bigger mistake, while Cedric downplays it with a light laugh. Despite the late hour, Lydia makes up her mind and decides to go to apologize. Immediately, determined not to delay lifting this heavy burden from her shoulders, she opens the door to be surprised by Arson standing in front of her fully ready, so he initiates the conversation, impassively asking her to get ready to leave. Lydia tries to seize the opportunity to bring up the subject of Randall and apologize, but he interrupts her firmly, pointing out that clouds have blocked the moon, and that this is the perfect time to sneak under this cover. Lydia swallows her words and nods in agreement, realizing that the time is not suitable for emotional talk now. The scene shifts to the labor camp in the east, where fatigue and despair loom over the place, and a pregnant red-haired woman named Maria appears staggering from extreme exhaustion among her colleagues. Maria whispers deliriously to the priestess, begging her to pray to the goddess to grant her one loaf of bread, specifically the one covered with lots of sugar, while her companion Nella looks at her with pity and offers her share of bread. Maria refuses the offer, claiming she is fine, but Nella insists anxiously, reminding her that she is pregnant and needs good nutrition. Maria tries to lighten the mood with a weak smile, claiming she was only joking and that she will go to sleep because she is tired. Maria lies down while thinking to herself with sorrow and regret, realizing that her talk about bread was not just a joke. She is overwhelmed by a feeling of guilt as she thinks about her fetus growing in her womb without even getting a decent meal. As Maria falls asleep, a voice whispering her name wakes her up, so she opens her eyes heavily and painfully. Maria smells a pleasant scent tickling her nose, the scent of fresh bread, to find a person wearing a white cloak in front of her, asking her to wake up. Maria thinks for a moment it is Nella, and rubs her eyes in astonishment, saying that her talk about bread was a joke, before noticing that the person in front of her is not her companion. Maria stares in surprise at the strange woman who sneaked up to her in the dark, wondering about her identity. Lydia smiles and puts her finger on her mouth, gesturing for silence, then takes out the sugar-covered bread loaf and asks her to follow her quietly. Maria stares at the bread in astonishment, unable to believe that her wish came true so quickly. Maria asks with a trembling voice if this woman is a messenger from the goddess. Lydia denies that with a gentle smile, explaining that she is a priestess and not a messenger. Lydia explains to Maria that she came to take her because she received great help from her in the past, although Maria might not remember that. Maria gets up quickly and anxiously, wondering if others can come too. Lydia reassures her and points to a nearby place where Byron and Nella appear safe. Maria's eyes widen in surprise as she sees the man standing with them. Lydia tells her he is the person Byron and Nella were searching for desperately. Arson looks at them seriously after revealing his identity. He turns to Lydia, and Lydia tells him that she brought Maria, so they must leave quickly before they are discovered. Lydia watches the road carefully and whispers to her companions that the guards are busy with a night patrol on the opposite side, which means they won't pass this way for a while, so she considers this their golden opportunity to move. Lydia leads them confidently directly towards the forest, and everyone moves behind her very cautiously among the trees. Suddenly, the silence of the night is pierced by a voice asking sharply, "Who's there?" So Arson, Lydia, and the rest of the group freeze in their places, and shock and panic appear on their faces. A person carrying a lantern appears in the darkness, but Lydia recognizes him immediately and screams in astonishment, "Grandpa Robert?" Old Man Robert is surprised to see Lydia in front of him and asks her in wonder if she knows him, while the group breathes a sigh of relief after realizing he is not one of the guards. The girls calm down and start laughing and hugging from the sheer relief. Lydia scolds old Robert, asking him why he is wandering outside instead of sleeping, and tells him that he scared them badly. Robert replies grumpily, pointing his finger, explaining that they were the ones who made noise first, so they have no right to be angry with him. Robert realizes the situation quickly and looks at them meaningfully, saying they are trying to escape. Robert decides to distance himself from the matter and turns his back to them, saying this has nothing to do with him, advising them not to get captured and to leave in peace. Lydia looks at the departing old man. Then Robert tells them that he is an old man with not much time left, while the young must get out to start a new life. Lydia makes up her mind and calls him Grandpa, but he orders her to stop dawdling and run away immediately. Robert stops amazed, while Lydia offers him with a smile to come with them. Robert looks at her in shock and disbelief at what he hears. Arson intervenes quickly and grabs Lydia's arm, whispering to her in objection that this was not part of the agreed plan. Lydia turns to Arson and explains to him that Grandpa Robert is a mining expert, and bringing him would be extremely useful, reminding him that there are mines in the borderlands too. Lydia turns again to Robert and tells him seriously that this is their only chance to escape, and asks him to come with them, while everyone welcomes him and urges him to hurry. Robert walks with them carrying his lantern, thinking to himself that he is an old man with numbered days, and fears becoming a burden on them on the road if they abandon him. Nella interrupts him and gives him a piece of bread, assuring him that they will go together until the end. Lydia notices that Arson is still angry about her behavior, so she runs away quickly from him to avoid his anger. They finally succeed in escaping safely from the labor camp, and the scene shifts to daytime where they are riding horses in the middle of the green forest. Lydia complains restlessly, saying that it's just that her butt hurts a little from riding the horse for too long. Arson looks ahead impassively and asks her to refrain from inappropriate remarks, as he said before. So Lydia replies, grumbling, asking, "What about her butt?" justifying that it is just a body part, and adds that she didn't ask him to apply ointment on it. Arson pulls the horse's reins and tells her sternly that if she asked for that, he would have made her dismount immediately, adding regretfully that unfortunately he does not wish to share a horse with a pervert. Lydia puffs her cheeks in annoyance and describes him as overly critical, then points to a more important matter, which is that the title he used, My Lady, is wrong. Arson admits that he doesn't feel she is really a priestess, so the title doesn't come out naturally. Lydia laughs and tells him that he has great talent in cursing fluently, and suggests to him to call her just Lydia. Arson is surprised by her request, stays silent for a moment, then blushes and whispers her name faintly as she wanted him to. While Lydia looks at him with a smile, Arson felt extremely embarrassed, so he tried to change the subject quickly, inquiring if the mine she mentioned earlier is the silver mine located in the borderlands. Then Lydia smiled happily and answered him enthusiastically, confirming that it is the one intended. Arson doubts the feasibility of the mine, assuring Lydia that the late Marquise abandoned developing it due to lack of profitability. So Lydia replies sharply, describing him as knowing nothing. She explains to him confidently that places containing silver veins often have magic stones buried near them, which means a probability of a magic stone mine existing in the borderlands. Arson asks her curiously about the source of her precise information, so she answers that she knew that from Grandpa Robert in her previous life. Arson goes back to thinking that she is speaking in that strange way again. He recalls the results of his investigation into her background, where nothing suspicious appeared. She lived her whole life in the capital except for her time at the Marquise's house, and had no connection to the Bayern Duchy house. He concludes logically that she shouldn't know Bayern or Nella either, and wonders in confusion if a lie could be so perfect and detailed. But reality imposes itself before his eyes. For exactly as she said, there was a labor camp in the eastern province, and the people he was desperately searching for were actually there. What increased his amazement was that when she met that old man a while ago, she called him by his name immediately as if she knew him. He steals a glance at her beside him, and a dangerous question starts looming in his mind. Is it really possible that she died and came back to life? Lydia cuts his train of thought enthusiastically, conditioning that if there really is a magic stone mine, he must give her a large share of it, so Arson agrees briefly. He asks her seriously what she intends to do with all that money. Lydia closes her eyes and dreams out loud, saying that once her revenge is over, she will leave to live on a warm island in the south, justifying that by her intense hatred of winter. Arson thinks about her words, acknowledging to himself that if she was really in a hard labor camp, her hatred of winter would be logical and completely justified, but he presses his hand on the saddle, thinking that it might not be just about winter. He asks her in a calm and direct voice if she actually hates the empire itself. Lydia laughs a clear and bright laugh, and admits to him with a broad smile that this is true as well. Arson contemplates her laughing face, and suddenly a strange thought crosses his mind, making his heart beat. He covers his face with the edge of his robe to hide his slight blush, and tells her in a faint voice that her plan to go to the south seems like a good idea. The procession finally arrives at a roadside inn, where a warm meal of bread and sausages is served to the hungry crowd. Nella collapses crying at the table, which worries everyone, but she reassures them that she is crying only because the reality of their survival has finally started to sink in. Arson looks at her with warm looks, while Nella expresses her gratitude that he is alive and asking him if he is injured anywhere. Arson answers her that this question should be directed to her, apologizing burningly for his delay and for not knowing she was in such a place. Bayern tries to calm him down with a tired smile, asking him not to apologize and confirming that he is only grateful that they came to save them. Lydia watches the reunion scene with emotion, but Nella suddenly asks in astonishment about the identity of the priestess who got them out, realizing she had never seen her before. Arson notices her surprise and explains to her and everyone that she is a priestess, but not of the usual kind. So Lydia is surprised by that description. Maria interrupts them while eating voraciously, apologizing for the interruption, but she asks the question that occupies her mind. Since she has no connection to the Bayern Duchy house, why was she saved too? Grandpa Robert agrees with her opinion, expressing his curiosity about the same thing, while Lydia smiles nervously. Lydia decides secretly that there is no need for them to know that she suffered terribly in her previous life and died of illness beside them, and that she wants to keep these painful memories to herself. Lydia tells them in a quiet voice that they all won't remember, and that she cannot go into details. Then she looks at them with a bright and sincere smile, telling them that she owes them a great debt, and asks them to consider it just a repayment of that debt. As understanding silence prevails, Lydia directs her speech to Grandpa Robert and tells him she wants to ask him a request. Grandpa Robert points to himself and asks her seriously if she has a special request for him alone. Lydia continues talking to Grandpa Robert, explaining that their destination contains a mine, and asks him to check if it is a magic stone mine, and even adds enthusiastically that it would be better if he supervised its development. Grandpa Robert is shocked and stunned, shouting that he thought she helped him escape to rest, but here she wants him to work in another mine, which makes everyone around the table laugh at this ironic situation. Conversation and light fun continue among the group afterwards, where an atmosphere of familiarity and relief prevails. Lydia talks with enthusiasm and happiness, but she suddenly notices someone leaving through the back door. Lydia decides to get up, saying she will go out to get some fresh air, while in reality she follows the person who left. Lydia looks around outside, sure that she saw him leave, and wonders where he went. She calls out to Sir Randall, so Randall appears suddenly behind her and speaks with bitter sarcasm about the honor a lowly person like him receives to be addressed with the title, Sir. Randall covers his ear nervously and asks her sharply what she wants, wondering if she came to slap him again or something like that. Lydia raises her hands, denying that immediately, and assures him that it is not like that, of course. She tells him clearly and calmly that she came to apologize, which leaves Randall in a state of astonishment and incomprehension. Lydia repeats her apology sincerely, while he stands silent looking at her. Lydia tells him what she heard from Sir Cedric about her ignoring him because of his status, and Randall asks her if the commander ordered her to apologize. Lydia smiles gently and denies that, explaining that it is late, but she realized she hurt him, so she came to apologize on her own. Lydia explains that she does not intend to force him to forgive her, because she didn't realize the magnitude of her mistake until she heard the story from Sir Cedric. Randall asks her in surprise why she is apologizing if she doesn't expect forgiveness. Lydia smiles brightly and tells him she just wanted to tell him that she will never commit that mistake again. She adds with seriousness mixed with joking that if she utters crazy things like that again, it's okay for him to hit her. Randall blushes with shyness and confusion and mumbles, wondering how a knight can raise his hand against a lady. Lydia laughs cheerfully, reminding him that this is true, but she is no longer a marquis's daughter, but has become a priestess. Randall tells her that it is not acceptable to hit priests either. Lydia gets nervous and tells him she didn't mean that, so Randall reassures her that he understands what she meant. Randall calms down and tells her, stammering, that it wasn't that painful in the beginning, but was just an unpleasant feeling. Meanwhile, Arson was watching the situation from behind the door, ready to intervene to stop them if a fight broke out, but he is surprised by the calm atmosphere. Arson sees the strange scene in front of him, where it looks like a new beginning, while thinking that if she were as in the past, she would have slapped Randall's face and not apologized to him. Arson reflects on the series of strange events that have occurred since getting involved with this lady. Arson remembers how she knew his true identity and told him the location of the nanny and teacher he searched for all his life, realizing that she has changed a lot, as if she is a completely different person who returned from death. Arson decides deep down to admit the truth now, certain that whatever the reason, this person is no longer the arrogant and bossy Lydia Ivanch of the past. Lydia's image appears in his imagination, laughing sincerely and reaching out her hand, inviting him to come this way. Arson looks at Lydia with surprise as she pulls his hand towards her. Arson suddenly wakes up from his sleep, his heart racing as he looks around in confusion. He wonders to himself about the nature of this strange dream, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Byron meets him with his gentle voice, surprised by his early rising. So Arson asks Byron why he didn't sleep longer. Neela says the situation feels like a beautiful dream that chases away sleep, and Byron agrees, explaining that he woke up early because they have to leave soon. Arson stares at them with rigid features hiding a storm of emotions, acknowledging to himself that it truly seems like an unbelievable dream. For here are the people he thought he would never see again in his life, alive and well, standing right in front of him, exchanging smiles as if nothing had happened. He realizes the undeniable truth that if not for Lydia telling him their location, finding them would have taken much longer. Or perhaps he would never have met them again in his entire life, and he clenches his fist tightly, moved by this thought. Arson suddenly realizes, wondering if he had even thanked her for what she did. As Lydia yawns drowsily, she starts the conversation with, "Good morning," wondering if it is dawn. Lydia rubs her eyes childishly while still under the influence of sleep, which surprises Arson and makes him look at her in astonishment. He notices the redness of her cheeks and her soft features, thinking to himself that the longer he looks at her, the more she looks like a cute rabbit to him. Lydia notices his continuous staring, so she asks him with surprise why he is looking at her that way, touching her face anxiously in case there is something on it. Arson becomes flustered and turns his face away, scolding himself for his strange thoughts, and tells her stammering that it is nothing. He gathers his courage and stands before her seriously, telling her that he just wanted to say, "Thank you." Lydia is surprised by his sudden thanks, and her eyes widen in astonishment. Arson continues his speech with sincerity and gratitude, explaining that thanks to her, he was able to find his teacher and nanny, and repeats his deep thanks to her. Lydia blushes and smiles in confusion, trying to downplay the matter. She tells him stammering that this was for her own benefit as well, but Arson insists on his position, saying that gratitude remains gratitude and must be expressed. Lydia feels extremely embarrassed by this atmosphere of serious gratitude, so she suddenly shouts at him, saying it is too early for thanks, reminding him that they haven't completely escaped until they leave the East. Arson agrees with her quietly, noting that her words are completely correct. Lydia gets excited and asks him to hurry and leave immediately, but Arson looks at her with a meaningful look, pointing to her clothes. Arson smiles a sly smile and asks her if she intends to leave wearing those night clothes. Lydia realizes the situation and screams in embarrassment, then runs quickly to change her clothes while scolding him, saying he doesn't need to know where she is going. As she leaves, she places her hand on her burning face, thinking with shock that teasing people is not one of Arson's usual traits. The scene shifts to the forest, where the carriages are moving in preparation for departure. Just as they did upon entry, they decided to escape the Count's territory disguised as employees of the Malin Merchant Guild, while the people rescued from the labor camp hide inside the carriages as cargo to avoid inspection. Inside, the passengers feel cold and tense, exchanging cautious whispers. Outside, Lydia, riding her horse, approaches the carriage driven by the merchant Milan and asks him to confirm the plan. She emphasizes the necessity of offering a bribe to the soldier when passing the checkpoint to ensure smooth passage. Milan agrees with her, confirming that this is the correct way to pass quickly. Lydia takes 2 gold coins from her pocket and offers them to him, asking if he can use this. He looks at her in surprise as he had already prepared something, but he understands her intention and accepts the offer. Lydia smiles and thanks Milan, but behind that word lay a cunning plan. For the gold button she presented was not just an ordinary bribe, but a button torn from her brother Devon's jacket, clearly bearing the crest of the Marquis Evanchel family engraved on it. Lydia realizes that once this button is passed to the soldier as a bribe, it will begin to circulate within the Count's territory. And what really arouses her curiosity is the Count's reaction when he discovers this fact. She turns her head, thinking that Emperor Richard does not know about the existence of an illegal labor camp in this place. She wonders in confusion how she ended up in her past life dragged and imprisoned in that hell. If Richard wasn't the perpetrator, was it Devon who orchestrated this dirty trick to get rid of her? Lydia realizes the button might not reach the Count's hand, or there might be no reaction at all, but she decides not to give up. She grips her horse's reins with strength and determination, convincing herself that she will discover the whole truth in time. In the Marquis's mansion, Devon slams the table hard, smashing what is on it in intense anger, cursing that bastard. He stands at his desk, blinded by rage, cursing the current situation after the news of Lydia becoming a priestess spread throughout the capital. He wipes his face wearily, realizing that the source of the rumor is the imperial palace itself, and as expected, the emperor is the one who spread it himself. The emperor's goal was to ensure she never gets involved with arson under any circumstances. But he realizes now that he is in a bind. Since it is not a baseless rumor, he cannot step forward publicly to deny it, and he does not intend to turn against the emperor's decision yet. Devon calls for the butler, who appears at the door immediately. He orders him sternly to send a message to Empress Giselle, asking her to visit the Marquise's mansion as soon as possible, deciding that he cannot sit idly by while things spiral out of his control. Later, Giselle sits with Devon, and Giselle asks him quietly not to worry too much about that rumor. Devon explains that this rumor might hinder Lydia and restrict her, and that is why he cares about it. But Giselle replies that even if the two really fell in love, what can people do? As long as Lydia gives up the priesthood, there will be no doctrinal problem preventing their marriage. Giselle suddenly changes the course of the conversation, asking her older brother if he still isn't thinking about marriage. So Devon finds her sudden question strange. Giselle smiles a bright smile hiding cunning behind it, reminding him that she has become a member of the Evanchel family now too, and that she is worried about the family line ending, then asks him maliciously if the reason is his inability to forget his first love. Devon laughs sarcastically, noting that she was trying to flatter him at first, and now she is interfering in his private affairs so suddenly. He tells her that she wants something more than his family name. Giselle smiles, saying it seems he has revealed and seen what is inside her. Devon decides to be frank with her, telling her with a sly smile that he will answer her honestly about her hidden motives, admitting that first love is just an excuse, and he simply does not want to marry, then asks her directly what she wants. Giselle threw her trump card, asking him if he would agree to adopt her second child, in the event he remains unmarried. Devon's eyes shine with intense interest and surprise at this proposal. Devon considers her clever plan, explaining that if the family adopts a prince, Richard will not be able to abandon the Evanchel family or marginalize them easily. Devon thinks about the offer, admitting it is a very tempting offer and promises her to think about it seriously. The events return to Lydia and the group as they left the eastern region quickly and joined the knights heading towards the Marquise's mansion. Lydia dismounts from the carriage, sighing with extreme exhaustion, complaining of fatigue. While saying she can finally relax a little, her foot suddenly stumbles and she loses her balance, letting out a scream of surprise. A strong hand grabs Lydia before she hits the ground, and she discovers that the one who saved her is Randall. So she thanks him, stammering. Randall bows his head silently, then turns his back to her quickly and leaves without uttering a word. Lydia breathes a sigh of relief, realizing she let her guard down without noticing. As Randall walks away with tension visible on him, Lydia thinks that if he hadn't caught her, she would have suffered a serious injury. Meanwhile, Arsene was watching the situation from afar, thinking with regret that perhaps he should have put her in the carriage from the start. He clenches his fist tightly, admitting to himself that if it were up to him, he would have wanted to be the person to catch and save her. He suddenly startles, trying to chase away these thoughts, asking himself in astonishment what on earth he is thinking. He sees Lydia holding her back, wondering if her waist hurts, adding that she complained of pain in her butt last time too. Suddenly, a heavy hand is placed on his shoulder, and Cedric appears, saying with feigned understanding that he realizes the young master is at a vigorous age, but he shouldn't do that. Arsene looks at him without understanding, so Cedric explains with a malicious smile that he means staring at a woman's butt. Arsene denies it rigidly, explaining that Lydia is primarily a priestess, not just a woman. Cedric laughs and corrects his sentence, saying then he shouldn't stare at a priestess's butt, while Arsene mutters in annoyance that he wasn't staring. Cedric leaves, waving his hand, joking that lying is bad too, and that he will pray to the goddess tonight to forgive the sin his master committed today, leaving Arsene feeling wronged. Lydia suddenly appears calling him, so Arsene jumps in fright and asks her nervously what she wants. Lydia smiles and asks for his permission, saying she wishes to take a look at the nearby plains before they enter the Marquise lands. Arsene finds her request strange but doesn't object, and asks her the reason. So Lydia smiles a confident smile. She tells him enthusiastically that she told him before she would cure her father's illness, and that the cure is right there. Lydia explains that the disease her father suffers from is called white ghost disease, named so because seeing illusions of white ghosts is one of its common symptoms. She adds that for a long time it was considered an incurable disease, but in her past life, and while in the labor camp, a cure for it was discovered. She reveals the shocking truth that this disease results from drug addiction, as the herb used medically throughout the country as curative smoke was the cause, and that once the accumulated toxins are removed from the body, one can recover from it quickly. Lydia picks a yellow flower, explaining that the method of detoxification lies in the roots of this yellow mountain dandelion. Tea is prepared from the roots, and Arsene watches the golden liquid being poured into the cup. Inside the Marquise mansion, Arsene and Lydia sit beside the sick Marquise bed, and Arsene asks her skeptically if a disease can really be cured by just tea like this. Lydia looks at him confidently, saying if he doesn't believe her, he just has to wait and watch. Lydia feeds her father the tea carefully, recalling with sorrow how in her past life she was locked in the labor camp and couldn't even attend the moment of her father's death, but she swears this time she won't let him leave in vain. After 10 days pass, the Marquis begins to open his eyes slowly while Devon and Lydia stand beside him in anticipation. His eyes meet Lydia's and he whispers her name with a weak voice, so her eyes tear up with emotion. Lydia rushes towards him and hugs him tightly, calling him, "Father!" The Marquis smiles and holds her to him affectionately, teasing her by asking if she missed her father that much. He strokes her hair gently, wondering lovingly why an adult lady is crying so bitterly. Lydia feigns burning tears before her newly awakened father, calling his name and Richard's name stammering to stir his emotions. She tells him with a broken voice that Richard broke off their engagement and announced his marriage to Giselle instead of her. Lydia increases the dose of drama, claiming that Richard didn't stop there, but gloated over her and wished she would choke on her heartbreak. She drops the biggest bombshell before her stunned father, revealing that Richard was cheating on her with Giselle throughout the engagement, and that her cousin is already pregnant by him. The Marquis ignites with anger, unable to believe Richard dares to do that to his daughter after the Marquis risked the family's future to support his rebellion. He describes Richard as an impudent bastard, then asks sharply about his son Devon's role in this farce and what he did to defend his sister. Lydia continues playing the victim role skillfully, telling her father that Devon accepted the engagement annulment coldly and without the slightest resistance. She adds that Devon registered Giselle as an adopted daughter of the family, and that he threatened Lydia to lock her in the mansion if she didn't agree, which shocks the Marquis overwhelmingly. The Marquis summons the butler immediately and asks him seriously if Devon sent any envoy to inform him of these developments. The butler confirms with embarrassment that the young master hasn't sent a single person since leaving for the capital. The Marquis feels betrayal and bitterness, wondering if his daughter was the only one who cared about nursing him during his illness while his heir son ignored him. The Marquis orders with extreme anger to bring Devon to him immediately, but Lydia stops him saying she has to tell him something else. Lydia claims she intended to hide the matter out of pity for him, but tells him there is something even more shocking. She reveals the harsh truth that Devon has already prepared his coffin in preparation for his death, thinking he wouldn't survive. The Marquis looks ahead with features filled with astonishment and brokenness, unable to comprehend that his son was waiting for his death. Suddenly, the Marquis holds his head and falls backwards, screaming from his high blood pressure, while the butler and Lydia rush to him. The Marquis regains consciousness, holding his head in pain, and decides he must send someone to the capital immediately to verify this information himself, thanking Lydia for telling him the truth. The Marquis orders the butler sternly to ensure the news of the Marquis's recovery never reaches the capital, and the servant agrees immediately. Lydia thinks intelligently, realizing her father is a man obsessed with blood purity, and that's why he was always lenient with Devon, the heir. Lydia realizes the situation is different now. Her father won't be able to overlook the betrayal of his son who wished for his death and prepared his coffin. Lydia smiles confidently, realizing the relationship between Devon and her father will inevitably collapse, and that this is the real starting point for her revenge. The events shift to the Lord's castle in the border region of Yiban, where days seem quiet and peaceful, as if the previous suffering was just a lie. Lydia strolls with her friend Maria in the market happily, and suddenly they encounter Cedric, who asks them about their destination. Lydia answers him with a smile that they went out to buy some baby supplies, given the lack of good shops in the countryside, and Cedric comments with a calm smile on how quickly the two girls became close. Maria announces enthusiastically that they decided to form a special group, so Cedric asks curiously about the type of this group, expressing his desire to join if it was fun. The two girls announce proudly that the group is dedicated to women who have no luck with men, raising their thumbs in confirmation. As it turns out, Maria had heard everything about Lydia's broken engagement. Lydia explains that anyone can join on one condition, which is to make a vow never to fall in love again. Arson looks at Lydia with a scrutinizing and skeptical look, wondering if she really plans never to meet any man again. Arson continues speaking to himself in a tone carrying advice laced with sarcasm, saying she should perhaps improve her ability to judge and choose men instead. Lydia is surprised by his looks, then approaches Arson suddenly, making him confused, and asks him if he has something else to say. Arson tells Lydia quietly that the man the Marquis sent to the capital has returned, so Lydia is surprised and shouts that this is not a trivial matter at all. Arson recalls what happened earlier, where the Marquis had already gotten up and started walking around the mansion, which gave him a positive shock. Lydia admits she only heard about the medicine's effectiveness, but she never expected it to work this amazingly fast. She asks Arson for his opinion on the matter, so he asks her in turn what she means by her words. She asks Arson seriously if he believes what she told him before more now. Arson confesses frankly that if he hadn't believed her words from the start, he wouldn't have kept her alive. Lydia blinks for a moment, realizing he didn't fully believe her at first. Lydia smiles brightly and thanks Arson sincerely. She tells him gratefully that without him, she would have starved to death in the Marquis's mansion, and that things went according to plan thanks to him. Meanwhile, the Marquis burns with anger as he reads the report, screaming that Devon didn't just make the coffin, but hired a sculptor to make the tombstone as well, and orders his men to go immediately to cancel the adoption. The Marquis shouts, condemning his son's audacity to talk about adoption without the permission of the head of the family, while Lydia pops her head in from the door calling her father. The Marquis turns to her with heartburn, telling her every word she said was true, describing Devon and Giselle as ungrateful bastards. The Marquis pours his wrath on Giselle specifically, recalling how he picked her up when she was an orphan and she should have been just a maid, but he raised her as a noble, only for her to stab him in the back in the end. The head butler confirms the truth of his words, while he continues with sorrow that instead of looking for a cure for him, she seduced the young master and dared to aspire to the position of adopted daughter. Lydia thinks nervously that canceling the adoption is certain, but it would be annoying if all anger focused on Giselle alone. Lydia decides to steer the anger intelligently, wondering with feigned innocence if her father really believes Giselle could decide all that on her own, hinting that Richard's influence must be involved in the adoption matter too. The Marquis realizes the matter and announces angrily that he cannot sit idly by and must go to the capital immediately. Lydia pretends to be worried, warning him that this might harm his health again. The Marquis pats her head affectionately, saying that after she treated him this way, no health problem faces him. He reassures her that her father will go and fix everything, and asks her to rest and join him later. Lydia refuses gently, telling him with a smile that she wants to go to the border, lying that since she became a priestess, she wants to do her best there. The Marquis is deeply moved by her words and his eyes tear up. The Marquis praises his daughter, saying she is truly impressive, and compares her to the naughty Devon who should have learned from his pure younger sister, while poking her forehead with his finger lovingly. Lydia laughs nervously, feeling a slight prick of conscience for deceiving her father. Lydia leaves the room thinking with relief that things went exactly as she wanted. Lydia realizes that once her father arrives in the capital, he will cancel Giselle's adoption, and that even if she and Devon agreed, the matter will end if the head of the family refuses, and expects the Emperor to try to persuade him. Lydia smiles confidently, assuring herself that the Emperor's attempts will be futile. She recalls the fact that her father believed his daughter of his direct blood would become Empress, and for this reason, he supported Richard. She remembers how Richard ignored that implicit agreement by cheating on her with Giselle. Lydia realizes with certainty that her father's feeling of betrayal and insult will be immense, to the point that neither the Emperor's persuasion nor threats will work with him anymore. Lydia speaks to Arson with complete confidence, asserting that Richard is just a novice emperor to her father who just ascended the throne, and no matter what he tries to do, her father will take care of the matter alone. Arson notices her improved mood, noting to himself that her complexion looks much better than it was in the capital. Arson stops suddenly and asks her suspiciously if she plans to return to the capital too. Lydia is surprised by his question and looks at him in astonishment. Arson suggests she stay here at the Marquis's mansion instead of leaving. Lydia blinks in confusion, trying to understand what he implies by his words. Lydia approaches him seriously, wondering if he is worried about the possibility of her spreading his secret. Lydia realizes his meaning, concluding he wants her to stay under his sight to monitor her for fear of revealing his secret, but he denies that quickly. She explains to him she doesn't mean that, but means she won't follow him to the border, but at the same time won't stay at the Marquis's mansion. Lydia reassures him she won't go to the Edis family mansion and won't cause him trouble if she accompanies him, so Arson asks her sarcastically where she will live at the border if she doesn't come to the mansion. She tells him enthusiastically that Sir Cedric told her there is a temple there, and a priestess should live in the temple naturally. Arson looks at her with a look filled with despair, explaining there is indeed a temple, but the problem is it's an abandoned building unused for 50 years. Lydia doesn't care about his warning, asking optimistically if the basic structure of the building still exists, confirming her decision to repair and use it with Priest Byron. Arson puts his hand on his forehead helplessly and decides to stop arguing, while Lydia reassures him she won't cause trouble anyway, and he just has to wait and see the reality himself. Arson thinks to himself worriedly that she doesn't realize how cold and dangerous the border region is. The next day, the Marquis leaves immediately heading to the capital, and since there is no work left at the Lord's castle, Arson, Lydia, and the group decide to set off towards the border as well. Arson orders his men to load the supplies provided by the Marquis onto the carriage. He turns to Lydia and asks her seriously to ride in the carriage this time, reasoning that the road to the border is fraught with danger. Lydia finds his description of the road as dangerous strange, but agrees to his request. Lydia sits, inside the carriage thinking about his words, noticing nothing significant has happened so far despite his warning, even if the road is a bit bumpy. She remembers that monsters live at the border, but convinces herself his words were just a precautionary warning, nothing more. The lines explain that the 3 villages located on the edges of the Marquesat are collectively known as the border, arid regions with long nights where monsters appear frequently. Since ancient times, the Edis family, vassals of the Evanchel Marquesat, were responsible for protecting this border in exchange for exemption from taxes and conscription. Lydia now realizes the real reason behind Arson guarding the border. She laughs lightly, telling herself they haven't reached the border yet, naively ruling out the idea of monsters appearing on the main road. Suddenly, something huge slams into the carriage with tremendous force, tipping the scales in an instant. Soldiers scream about monsters, and a giant multi-legged monster appears attacking the convoy, while Arson issues his orders to everyone to attack. Lydia screams in terror, unable to believe what she just ruled out has actually happened so quickly. Inside the tilted carriage, Lydia tries to wake Neela, who lost consciousness from the shock. While trying to protect Neela, she hears the soldiers screaming outside, trying to lure the monsters away from the people. Maria calls out in a panic-filled voice to Priestess Lydia and Neela, asking them to hurry and come in this direction to survive the attack. At that critical moment, Lydia rushes to protect Maria, hugging her tightly amidst the utter chaos. Lydia freezes in place, unable to move her legs from sheer terror, while the monster opens its terrifying jaw ready to pounce on them. Lydia shuts her eyes tightly, surrendering to the idea that her end has come and she will die in this desolate place. Suddenly, a sharp sound cuts the air, and a shining sword slices through the monster's body at the last moment. Arson appears from behind the dust with blood covering his face and clothes, asking Lydia eagerly and anxiously if she is okay. Lydia looks at him with tears filling her eyes from shock and relief, whispering his name with a trembling voice. Arson asks them calmly and confidently to step aside a little until he finishes the matter quickly, while he stands firmly holding his sword. Lydia watches his broad back as he heads towards the monsters, admitting to herself she knew he was titled the strongest swordsman in the Empire, but seeing it in reality is completely different. She now realizes clearly, seeing his overwhelming power, why Devon and Emperor Richard were so keen and desperate to keep Arson on their side. The battle ends and everyone rushes to check on each other, while Maria feels horrified seeing the blood covering Lydia's clothes. Lydia laughs lightly to reassure her, explaining this blood is not hers but monster blood that splattered on her during the fight. Maria feels relieved, saying it's good she wasn't hurt, but the blood remaining is a problem in itself, and asks her to go wash and change her clothes immediately, so Lydia agrees. After an hour, Lydia comes out feeling refreshed after washing and wearing clean clothes. She talks to Maria while carrying dirty clothes, expressing relief at a nearby stream, suggesting washing the blood-stained clothes too. Suddenly, the 2 girls stop in their tracks, mouths open in shock and astonishment at what they see in front of them. The scene that stopped them was seeing the knights, including Arsene, washing in the river having taken off their shirts, revealing their athletic bodies. Maria tells the knights they will wash clothes in that place and asks them to make themselves comfortable bathing. One of the knights shouts with spontaneous enthusiasm, inviting them to be at ease, while Lydia tries to silence her and pull her away, asking her to do it later. Maria argues with her friend Lydia, justifying her desire to stay that they aren't completely naked, adding boldly that they have amazing bodies and it's fun to look at. Lydia scolds her, covering her eyes, saying staring like this is improper. But Lydia's eyes suddenly fall on Arson, slicking his wet hair back, getting a new shock of admiration. Lydia puts her hand on Maria's mouth to silence her, whispering to herself in astonishment that she thought Sir Arson had a slim body, but she discovers now, staring at his ripped muscles and sculpted waist, that he possesses an amazing and surprising physique under his clothes. Maria notices Lydia's looks, smiles slyly, and whispers to her that she also thinks they look wonderful, making Lydia scream suddenly, trying to catch her thoughts. Lydia tries to regain her dignity, asking Maria to stop making jokes inappropriate for priestesses. But Maria quickly returns to justify her stance, saying even the goddess would allow just looking, especially since the scene is right in front of them and they aren't seeking it on purpose. Lydia asks if that is true, so Maria confirms it. Lydia asks her opinion, who she thinks has the best body among the knights. The 2 girls thought they were speaking in a low voice no one could hear, but in reality, all the knights, led by Arson, were listening with intense focus to every word, wondering with curiosity and male vanity about the identity of the knight the lady would choose as the owner of the best body. The knights exchange enthusiastic looks, whispering to each other that an opportunity like this shouldn't be missed, so one of them approaches Priestess Lydia with a confident smile. The knights begin showing off their muscles proudly under the sunlight, and one asks the priestess to look closely at their magnificent muscles, while striking poses highlighting their physical strength. Arson watches the scene from afar with a cold look and annoyed features, thinking to himself that everyone is focusing on trivial matters of no value. Lydia puts her hand on her chin in deep thought, indicating the choice is very difficult, while the knights await her verdict with tension and hope. After moments of hesitation, Lydia announces her honest opinion, saying Sir Cedric has the best body in her view, which strikes everyone with surprise. Maria agrees with her enthusiastically, confirming she chooses Sir Cedric too, so the two ladies agree on the same night. The news falls like a thunderbolt on the rest of the knights, whose features freeze from shock, while Cedric emerges as an unexpected winner amidst his colleagues' disappointment. Cedric shouts in victory and overwhelming happiness, raising his fist in the air, celebrating winning the title of Best Body Owner. The losing knights whisper with envy, saying Cedric is about to die of joy there, trying to justify their loss that the girls couldn't see clearly from that distance. One knight tries to save face before his soldiers, claiming with feigned seriousness that practical combat muscles are what really matter, and the two ladies don't realize what they are looking at, while Cedric mocks them laughing and asks them to just admit jealousy. Arson stands alone, thinking with strange seriousness whether girls really prefer that huge and bulky type of muscles. Arson looks at his hand and body doubtfully, wondering if huge, bulging bodies are Lydia's preferred taste, but denies it internally with a decisive no. Suddenly, he remembers Lydia's intense and prolonged looks at him earlier, and asks himself in confusion, if the huge type is her favorite, why was she staring at his body like that? He automatically assumed she would choose him because of those looks. Arson dries his hair with a towel while drowning in his analysis, remembering the Emperor wasn't that muscular either, wondering if personal taste and love are two separate things. He concludes with complete seriousness that going against her preferred physical taste for him must mean it is true love. Indeed. Suddenly he stops drying his hair, shocked by the train of his thoughts, asking in astonishment why he cares about this trivial matter in the first place. Arson decides to ignore the matter and consider it unimportant, but Knight Cedric interrupts him, waving his arms happily and calling him Commander. Cedric boasts of his body before Arson, pointing out proudly that his body has been recognized by two ladies, asking if he looks cool too. Arson turns his face, trying to show indifference, but in reality, he feels intense annoyance and distress from the whole situation. Arson cannot hold back his annoyance, then answers denying with, "Not at all." Cedric looks at him with surprise and tension, trying to salvage the situation quickly, claiming he was only joking and there is no need for his tension. Arson walks away, wiping his face with his hand, cursing the situation and thinking he acts very strangely whenever it concerns Lydia for some reason. The scene shifts to the camp setup where Arson enters his nanny Neela's tent to ask affectionately about her condition. Neela smiles gently, reassuring him it was just a minor shock and she wasn't badly hurt, apologizing for delaying the journey because of her. Arson sits beside her, telling her no need to apologize, for they had to fix the overturned carriage anyway, so they decided to camp here for today. Neela sighs and asks him hesitantly about Lady Lydia's condition, explaining she didn't see clearly because Lydia was protecting her with her body, but she knows she saw the monster die right before her eyes and must be terrified. Features of worry appear clearly on Arson's face. Neela recalls those difficult moments with gratitude, telling him that even in that terrifying situation, Lydia tried to protect her with her entire body without hesitation. Arson sits silently, feeling an overwhelming wave of sincere gratitude filling his heart towards that girl. He smiles a calm, warm smile, whispering to himself in affirmation, appreciating her courage and sacrifice. Arson thinks to himself, conjuring the image of smiling Lydia, that she has given him nothing but reasons to be grateful to her all the time. As Nanny Neela bids him farewell, she entrusts the young lady to him and asks him to take good care of her. So Arson promises briefly. Arson walks towards the tents, determined to seize this opportunity to convince Lydia to give up the idea of the dilapidated temple and come to stay at the mansion. He tells himself she must have realized now the danger of demonic monsters, and if he explains the details of border monsters to her, she won't be stubborn about staying alone. He compares in his mind the safe mansion and the abandoned temple, only for his train of thought to be cut by seeing his deputy Cedric standing with Lydia in front of a tent. Lydia wonders in shock and disapproval at what Cedric just said. Cedric tells her he suggested it is better for her to share the tent with Commander Arson, so Lydia shouts in his face, asking the reason. Cedric explains to her that the carriage is under repair. Sleeping in the open is too dangerous, and since she cannot share a tent with male knights, staying beside the commander is the safest option. So Lydia agrees with the logic but hesitates. Cedric tries to persuade her, pointing out it might look strange to others for an unmarried man and woman to share one tent, asking slyly if she is worried the commander might try to do something fishy with her. Lydia denies immediately with a smile, confirming Sir Arson from what she saw is a very conservative person and wouldn't do anything inappropriate. Cedric laughs, about to tell her their commander isn't conservative but hopeless in dealing with women, were it not for Arson appearing behind him. Arson stares sharply at Cedric, scolding him, saying he talks too much, causing terror in Cedric. Lydia turns to Arson, asking him innocently and boldly if he is truly hopeless with women. Arson squeezes Cedric's shoulder with silent force and violence, denying that with complete rigidity. Lydia hums suspiciously, while Arson sweats, thinking the term hopeless refers to someone who doesn't know how to deal with women, while he chooses not to date on purpose, so it is different. Lydia smiles slyly, asking him in a joking tone if that's the case, so Arson realizes she doesn't believe him. Lydia tries to salvage the situation, pretending with exaggerated enthusiasm she believes him completely. She adds that this is interesting, and hearing that made her not hesitate to share the tent with him anymore, confirming she believes him but finds it funny. Arson realizes she doesn't believe him at all, and inside the tent asks her seriously to take the inner bed while he takes the outer side. Lydia praises his morals, saying he has good style for a hopeless person, so he reminds her with annoyance that she just said she believes him, so she just says, Lydia wonders curiously why he chooses not to date on purpose despite his great popularity, asking if it is because of a secret. Arson falls silent for a moment, admitting to himself she isn't wrong, for if he had a lover, he might reveal his secret to her unintentionally. He thinks bitterly of the crime he committed to bear the burden of this heavy secret, deciding increasing the number of people responsible for it in this situation is a luxury he doesn't possess. Lydia rolls on the bed in boredom, and Arson tells her she seems interested in his love life. So Lydia tells him at his age it is time for marriage, and since he isn't engaged, she just feels curious. Arson throws the ball back to her court, reminding her that young Marquis Devon isn't married either, and she should worry about him instead. So Lydia falls silent nervously. Lydia suddenly tells him slyly that Devon has a secret too. Arson asks curiously what this secret is, so she asks if he feels curious. She asks him to come closer, and when he leans towards her, she whispers in his ear, saying, "The secret is a secret." Lydia laughs cheerfully at her prank, while Arson sighs, saying she enjoys teasing him a lot. Lydia winks at him cheerfully, promising to tell him the truth this time. Lydia reveals the secret in a faint voice, explaining it isn't that Devon doesn't marry by will, but he actually cannot. She goes back in memory, where her mother advised her on her deathbed that she would grow up, marry, and have children someday. She remembers her strict instructions on the necessity of bearing at least 2 sons, to give one of them to her brother. Lydia returns to the present to drop the bomb in Arson's face, whispering that Devon is a eunuch. Arson is struck by complete astonishment, his eyes bulging from shock and confusion, stammering what she just said. Lydia smiles sarcastically, repeating her words clearly, confirming her brother's body cannot perform a man's functions. Lydia explains her mother was frail and cherished Devon greatly for being her only son, remaining worried about him until the last day of her life. She adds her mother asked her to bear 2 sons to give an heir to her brother unable to procreate, and they agreed to keep this a secret between them only. Lydia admits to herself she kept this secret faithfully in her past life out of love for her mother, but doesn't intend to do so now. Telling Arson the reason goes back to a wrong medicine given to him in childhood. Arson puts his hand on his chin thinking, seeing that calling this a dangerous secret is a bit exaggerated, as nobles can adopt an heir easily, so it isn't a fatal flaw. Lydia clarifies others might see it that way, but her father insists strongly the family line continues from his direct blood and won't accept otherwise. Arson questions the logic of the plan, pointing out the Marquis won't give up his only son easily, meaning the adoption plan might conflict with the father's wish if he doesn't know. Lydia praises him with a sly smile for his keen observation, but tells him there are ways around that obstacle too. She winks at him cheerfully, announcing she won't tell him that real secret even if he asks, because it is a very real secret. She thinks to herself that his knowing that secret might make him make a deal directly with Devon bypassing her. And despite trusting him, she prefers reducing variables to ensure her plan's success. Arson adjusts his tie coldly, announcing he isn't particularly curious to know more. Arson changes the subject, asking her seriously if she really intends to stay in the abandoned temple. He explains the danger of the situation at the border, pointing out monsters often descend to villages, and many are much fiercer and huger than the monster she saw today. He adds ordinary people freeze in fear and cannot move when facing one. So Lydia asks anxiously about the frequency of those monsters appearing. Arson assures her disturbances caused by monsters happen at least once a month, making Lydia think deeply and nervously. Arson thinks she realized the danger and will agree to come to the Edis mansion, but she surprises him with a strange decision saying, "I must learn sword fighting." Arson looks at her in astonishment and shock, tongue-tied by surprise. Lydia repeats her decision firmly, saying she will learn to use a sword, justifying she realized her need for a means to protect herself, at least after hearing those dangers. She raises her thumb with a confident smile, reminding him of her previous words that she will never be a burden to him, while Arson stands silent, unable to reply. Arson wipes his hair in fatigue and frustration, acknowledging to himself that persuading her is not easy at all. He decides to end the discussion for the night, ordering her to sleep because they have to leave early in the morning. So Lydia complains in astonishment, asking who can sleep at this very early time. Despite her complaining, Lydia falls into a deep and comfortable sleep as soon as she lies down, while Arson stands beside the bed, unable to sleep because of her. Arson sits holding his sword to guard her, looking at her with pity and appreciating she must be exhausted. Arson recalls what Lydia went through recently, from poisoning herself, climbing walls to escape the Marquise's mansion, to sneaking into the labor camp and facing the monster attack today, so he decides to stay up to protect her all night. Arson cleans his sword in the silence of the night inside the tent, and suddenly a muffled moan reaches his ears. He turns towards the bed to find Lydia tossing and turning with clear restlessness, so he watches her with concern, wondering to himself if she is suffering from a nightmare haunting her dreams. In the depths of her sleep, Lydia's memory returns to those dark moments, where she finds herself kneeling in a cold and desolate cell. Richard appears before the bars with cold features, assuring her rigidly that he will not kill her. While tears stream from Lydia's eyes, Richard reminds her that attempting to kill the future empress and the heir to the throne in her womb is a heinous and unforgivable crime. However, he adds that her engagement to him saved him when he was just a prince. So since he has become emperor now, he will return the favor by sparing her life. Lydia reaches her trembling hand towards him from behind the bars, whispering his name Richard, pleadingly. But he cuts her off with biting coldness, announcing that the accounts between them end at this point. He delivers his final words sternly, demanding that she act wisely from now on, and emphasizing that sparing her life is the last mercy he can offer her. Richard turns his back and prepares to leave, so Lydia screams in panic and fear, begging him not to go. She admits her mistake with a broken voice. She clings to the bars tightly and begs him weeping to stay with her a little longer, expressing her intense fear of remaining alone in this place. She screams his name at the top of her lungs while kneeling on the ground in a complete breakdown. But Richard naturally continues walking away without turning towards her even once. Lydia watches his back as he moves away and clenches her fist tightly on her dress, thinking with malice about that bastard who deemed even a single parting glance too much for her. At that moment, her features change from brokenness to overwhelming anger, and she vows in secret, saying that she, too, will not kill him. She gives a sharp look full of vengeance, swearing that instead of killing, she will make his life a living hell and ensure he never lives in comfort again. Lydia mutters the name Richard in her sleep while asking him not to go, while Arson listens to her words with complex features. He smiles bitterly and sarcastically, whispering to himself that she previously said she hated him. He turns his back to her, thinking that no matter how great her hatred for him is, a part of her heart must still be attached to him. Suddenly, Arson feels a painful contraction and a strange feeling of resentment squeezing his chest. He watches her while she sleeps, and tries to convince himself that her feelings towards the Emperor have absolutely nothing to do with him. He clenches his fist tightly, wondering in confusion about the reason for this rush of wild and uncontrollable emotions inside him whenever he is close to Lydia, whether in the valley previously or now. In the capital, Devon stands shocked and pale-faced in front of his luxurious mansion, wondering in terror if his father is on his way to him. His servant confirms the news, explaining that someone from the checkpoint sent a message stating that the Marquise has indeed crossed the outer wall of the capital. Devon asks, stammering, about the white ghost disease, and if his father really recovered from it, then orders the servant quickly and in panic to remove the coffin immediately because he is going out to receive his father. The Marquis arrives in his carriage and his servant helps him down. Devon runs towards his father, opening his arms with a wide and fake smile, feigning happiness and a warm welcome for his father. The Marquis looks at his son with sharp and piercing eyes, so Devon asks him if he has fully recovered from his illness, adding that he can hardly believe it even after seeing it himself. The Marquis calls him by his name in a serious tone. Devon maintains his nervous smile and answers with artificial politeness, "Yes, father." The Marquis faces his son Devon directly and asks him in a firm tone if it is true that he tried to register Giselle in the family registry. Devon smiles nervously, trying to salvage the situation, and begins to stammer, searching for an answer. Devon decides to change the subject, pretending to worry about his father's health, and suggests entering the mansion for fear that the Marquis might collapse again. As they enter, Devon looks around nervously, telling himself that it is good the coffin was already removed. Otherwise, he would have been in big trouble if it were found. Devon tries to continue his charade and asks the butler suspiciously if his father is really okay, because he doesn't look healthy. The butler cuts through the doubt with certainty, confirming that the Marquis is only exhausted from travel, and his illness has been completely cured. So the Marquis interrupts him sternly, directing his speech to Devon and demanding he answer truthfully about the subject of registering Giselle. Sweat pours from Devon's face, and he forces himself to smile as he admits to his father in a faint voice that the matter is true. The Marquis's features change to anger and contempt, and he asks his son sharply if he has no pride. He scolds him severely, pointing out that his younger sister's place was stolen, and instead of defending her, he stood on the side of the one who stole it. So Devon tries to justify his position that the Emperor's will was firm, and he had no choice. Devon continues his flimsy justifications, claiming that he agreed to break the engagement for Lydia's sake, because she would suffer if she married a man who no longer loved her. Devon continues his speech with increasing confidence, adding that the Emperor had also made him a promise. The Marquis wonders with astonishment what this promise is. Devon's eyes shine with greed as he tells his father proudly that the Emperor promised to grant him the title of Duke, thinking that this would please his father. Suddenly, the Marquis grabs a nearby pillow and hits Devon on the head with it forcefully, making him scream in pain and surprise. The Marquis looks at his son with extreme contempt, describing him as a foolish boy. The Marquis shouts in his face with overwhelming anger, asserting that ambition has blinded his insight, and that this stupidity of his will bring ruin and destruction upon the entire family lineage. 2 days later, Arsene, Lydia, and the group arrive safely at the snow-covered border region. Lydia wanders through the village carrying her luggage and notices with astonishment the miserable state of the buildings, wondering to herself about the reason for this destruction despite her belief that the battles did not reach the border during the coup. She looks around in shock, noting that not a single building has survived damage. Knight Cedric approaches her and she inquires about the situation, so he explains with regret that half of their knights fled during the coup, making them unable to properly repel the attacks of demonic monsters. Cedric smiles while rubbing his neck, adding optimistically that now with Commander Arsene back, they should be able to restore order. Lydia looks at Arsene's back, realizing clearly that he is an indispensable person for this border region. Meanwhile, the old followers of the Byron family and the villagers meet each other amidst an atmosphere of affection. Lydia notices that the residents have recognized the old man Robert, and concludes that he was perhaps one of the old servants of the Byron family. Lydia breathes a sigh of relief and feels great comfort, certain that everyone here will be safe under Sir Arsene's protection no matter what happens. She smiles with satisfaction, telling herself that she has achieved at least one valuable goal in her current life. Lydia turns to Cedric and asks him about the location of the temple, so Cedric looks at her with shock and incomprehension, wondering if she really intends to live in the temple, so she confirms it with a smile, saying she is a priestess, of course. Cedric feels embarrassed and hesitant, so he suddenly calls Randall and asks him to show the young lady the way, trying to escape the situation. Lydia is struck by astonishment and shock upon seeing Randall and wonders in secret with annoyance why him of all people, describing the situation as very awkward. Randall gestures with his hand, coldly asking her to follow him while Lydia walks behind him nervously amidst the trees. Lydia stands in front of the abandoned temple, tongue-tied by surprise due to its miserable condition, to the point that she screamed in disbelief that this place is a temple, describing it as no different from an old storehouse. She reaches out to open the dilapidated wooden door, thinking she heard about its bad condition, but the reality was much worse than she imagined. She tries to lighten the atmosphere with a nervous laugh, noting that the door was locked, meaning it hasn't been used for a very long time. While she is speaking, Randall steps forward with rigid features and asks her to step aside before kicking the door with tremendous force to open it. Lydia freezes in place, sweating, telling herself in astonishment that this man just opened the temple door with a kick. Randall turns his face towards her and tells her simply that the door is open, so Lydia thanks him with a very nervous smile. Then Randall leaves suddenly, leaving Lydia confused. After a full week passes, Arsene appears in his office, drowning in papers and work. His assistant Cedric presents him a report about strangers wandering in the area, explaining that they claim to be wandering mercenaries, but they seem affiliated with the Emperor's faction and are asking about Commander Arsene. Arsene decides to leave them alone for the time being, thinking confidently that they won't find anything no matter how much they search. Arson hasn't left his office even once all week, justifying it to himself that he doesn't have time to worry about those intruders. Arson asks Cedric worriedly if the strangers approached the temple, pointing out the danger of something happening to Lydia. So Cedric answers him that no report stated that, but he will send Randall to check later. Arson is surprised by the choice of Randall specifically, reminding Cedric that Randall and Lydia do not get along. So Cedric laughs, explaining that was in the past, and that they get along well now. Randall even helps with the repairs. Arson's features change to suspicion and astonishment, wondering how Randall, who doesn't believe in gods, frequents the temple. Arson suddenly rises from his chair, telling Cedric he will stop by the temple himself for a moment, which surprises his assistant. Arson arrives at the temple to find Lydia sitting in the garden, so she calls his name in surprise. Lydia asks him if he came to see Priest Byron, telling him that he is not currently present. Arson denies that, explaining he only came to check on the place. While Lydia notes that the temple looks decent now thanks to hard work and people's help, Lydia praises Randall with great enthusiasm, describing him as amazing for his ability to do everything from carpentry to cleaning, while Arson listens with uncomfortable features. Lydia is surprised by Arson's silent reaction and wonders in secret if he is pretending not to know, confirming to herself that Randall definitely helped her. Lydia remembers how she thanked Randall previously, and how he answered shyly while turning his face away that the credit goes to her for finishing the work quickly. She also remembers how he justified his help to her stammering, claiming he did it only because Commander Arson ordered him to. Lydia returns to reality looking at Arson, thinking that Randall probably said that because he is too shy to brag about himself. She thinks with a satisfied smile that Cedric was right and that Arson is an innocent boy. Arson notices Lydia's looks at him and asks her with surprise why she is staring, so Lydia denies any reason and tries to salvage the situation. Lydia seizes the opportunity and asks him if she can ask a small favor since they met. Lydia's features brighten and she speaks enthusiastically about lily of the valley flowers in the forest, which are considered a symbol of the goddess, asking his permission to bring some to plant in the temple courtyard. Arson realizes this is the favor she wanted to ask, and offers to accompany her to the forest given the danger of going alone. Lydia tries to refuse politely, noting that he is busy and there is no need to bother him, and that she will go with Priest Byron later. But Arson cuts her off firmly, rejecting the idea of her going later, because he knows for certain she will say that now, then sneak off to go alone as soon as he leaves. Lydia wonders to herself in astonishment how he knew her desire, while Arson cuts her train of thought, warning her of sliding rocks and helping her down. He extends his hand to her carefully, so Lydia holds it to cross the rocky slope safely. Arson continues holding her hand and helping her until her foot reaches the flat ground. Lydia's eyes widen in amazement at the beauty of the place as soon as she arrives. She points with childish enthusiasm to the flower field stretching before her, drawing Arson's attention to their abundance and beauty. Suddenly, Arson stops and stares with intense focus towards the trees, which terrifies Lydia, who thinks a monster has appeared. So she trembles and stammers while pointing behind him in panic. Arson turns calmly to see what she means, then tells her coldly that the huge creature with bulging muscles in front of them isn't a monster, but just a winter rabbit, which strikes Lydia with astonishment and shock. Lydia suddenly remembers that he previously compared her to a winter rabbit, and Arson acknowledges that quite calmly. Lydia burns with anger as she compares in her imagination between her appearance and this muscular and scary rabbit, rejecting the comparison completely and wondering if she looks like a monster in his eyes. Arson tries to justify his position nervously, explaining that rabbits have thick and cute fur only in winter, and since it is spring, its shape changed, but Lydia refuses to hear his excuses and screams that he is a liar. Arson decides to end the futile argument, reassuring her that it isn't a monster anyway, and there is no need to worry, while she stands crossing her arms in annoyance. Suddenly, Arson's features change to seriousness, realizing he almost forgot the real reason for coming here. He asks her seriously if men claiming to be mercenaries came looking for her, so Lydia confirms that while holding her shovel, wondering in amazement how he knew about the matter even though they just left. Arson reveals their true identity as scouts affiliated with the Emperor, and promises her he will kick them out soon, but recommends she be extremely cautious. Lydia expresses her concern that kicking them out by force might arouse suspicions about them hiding something at the border. She thinks deeply about the dire consequences, realizing that if suspicion hovers around Arson, Richard might send soldiers openly, and if one of them recognizes the Byron Duchy followers hiding here, a disaster will occur. Lydia tells him it is better to make them leave on their own, but the dilemma lies in how to push them to do that. Lydia suggests a bold and surprising idea, which is fabricating a romantic scandal between them. Arson is severely shocked and his face turns red with embarrassment, unable to comprehend what she is saying. Lydia explains her plan cunningly, suggesting spreading a rumor that she is pursuing him romantically while he is uninterested in her, to avoid any exaggeration that might backfire, considering this amount of drama will suffice. Arson remains silent and stunned, while Lydia confirms that the scouts will rush to convey this trivial news immediately to the capital. Lydia laughs confidently, asserting that acting as she used to do with Richard will work, because the Emperor will lose interest in the border and will pity Arson if he hears she is obsessively pursuing him. And when Arson suggests with concern the possibility that the Emperor might summon her to the capital to squash the rumor, Lydia raises her finger, denying that completely and with absolute confidence. She explains to him that doing so would make people assume the Emperor still harbors feelings for his former fiancée whom he abandoned. She points out that Richard, who reached the throne by a coup and broke off his engagement immediately upon his coronation, suffers from a shaky and unstable image. She adds that his desperate need for public support currently will prevent him from getting involved in messy rumors with the daughter of the Marquis, who is one of his biggest supporters. Lydia concludes her speech with a bright smile, considering it a tight plan, and asks his opinion. Arson looks at her for a moment before agreeing reluctantly. Arson emphasizes to Lydia strictly that this plan must remain a buried secret between them only. He adds seriously that if they are going to do this, she must commit to it and execute it completely and correctly. Lydia smiles cheerfully and agrees, then jokes that she will prepare and visit his mansion so much that she will wear out his doorstep from entering and exiting. Arson looks at her with an annoyed side glance, thinking she returned to saying this provocative stuff again, and tells her that if she had agreed to stay at the mansion from the beginning, executing this plan would have been much easier. Lydia asks him slyly why he wants to get her into his mansion so badly, warning him that people might think he is flirting with her if they hear this insistence, making him startle nervously. Lydia laughs while holding her shovel, saying she knows the truth and there is no need to deny, describing him as hopelessly innocent. Arson tries to object, stammering and denying the attribute of innocence, but Lydia interrupts him suddenly, pointing enthusiastically to a field full of flowers there. Lydia runs towards the flowers, leaving Arson behind. While he looks at her with calm features, he watches her running among the flowers, thinking with wonder that the Emperor fears this woman. He wonders in confusion what the Emperor found exhausting and frustrating in a cheerful and bright personality like hers. He puts his hand on his face, admitting in secret that watching her wandering around him makes her look more attractive and cute in his eyes. He remembers his words to her a moment ago about the necessity of sticking to the plan, and realizes in his heart honestly that he didn't need to add that condition strictly. He admits to himself that there were other ways to deal with the scouts, but he didn't want to reject her plan because he simply doesn't mind existing with her in this way. Evening falls, and Lydia and Arson arrive at the temple door, where she thanks him with a warm smile for accompanying her on the way back. Lydia raises her finger, reminding him of the necessity to stick to the plan, saying he cannot act kindly anymore, because she is the one supposed to be chasing him. Arson turns his face away from her with rigid features and replies that what he is doing is not chasing, but close, accurate monitoring. Lydia asks him to cooperate for their common goal, even though this spoils the plan a little, so Arson agrees briefly, saying he will try. And before he leaves, Lydia thanks him suddenly for sending Sir Randall to help, so Arson stops surprised by the name. Lydia explains she knows he sent him to help clean the temple, and she heard everything earlier, so Arson realizes with shock that brat Randall came on his own and used him as an excuse. Lydia laughs happily, considering Arson shy and wanted to hide his kindness, but she expresses her desire to thank him anyway. Arson thinks seriously about the necessity of correcting this misunderstanding and telling her that Randall lied and he didn't send him, but he hesitates and covers his mouth, feeling unwilling to say that for some reason, so he decides to leave silently, bidding her farewell. Arson leaves the temple, noticing it has gotten late and it is already evening, even though he told Cedric he would return quickly. He walks distracted, thinking about the strange irony in their plan. He pretends to push Lydia away from him, while she pretends she admires him and chases him. Arson wonders to himself as he walks away, while Lydia stands in the garden, and they think about whether they will really be able to execute this charade successfully. Lydia's memory returns to the past, specifically to the day of her debut in society, which coincided with the anniversary of her mother's death. Lydia stands alone under the moonlight with tears in her eyes, thinking she couldn't force herself to smile and have fun while her mind is occupied with her mother's memory. And suddenly she hears movement behind her. Prince Richard appears in his youth and asks her curiously about the reason for Lady Evancel's presence here. Lydia dries her tears in confusion, and tells him with a broken and sad voice that she misses her mother very much. Lydia's sight returns to the past, where Richard stands before her on that moonlit night and offers her a handkerchief to wipe her tears, telling her in a warm tone that crying is not shameful, and he understands her feelings well. He smiles at her reassuringly, while she stands before him with tears filling her eyes, and he confesses to her shyly that it is embarrassing, but reveals to her that he misses his deceased mother too. Lydia remembers that moment clearly, and how she felt embarrassed and weak, but she realizes now that those words were the key that made her heart incline towards Richard. Lydia wonders in her heart with sorrow if that was the moment she fell into his trap, while tears stream from her eyes at the memory. She reviews the tape of her memories, where she started after that day frequenting the third prince's palace, and rumors spread about their relationship among the servants who witnessed those repeated visits. The sequence of painful events passes before her eyes: the engagement, then the betrayal, the annulment, the prison, and finally turning back time. Lydia startles in the present, tearing that mental image in anger, realizing it isn't a happy memory worth retrieving. She decides to use the same method that entrapped her in the past, but this time she is the one who will hold the reins, determined to show her affection openly and exaggeratedly. She clenches her hand with determination, deciding to start from tomorrow making people notice her alleged obsession with arson. The next day, Lydia walks beside Arson in the market and notices people's whispers and looks, so she asks him with a smile if there is something wrong. While he seems annoyed, Arson sighs in distress, telling her they were subjected to a scam again in Count Mon's lands. He points angrily to the sacks of grain, explaining that merchants sold grain worth 1 gold coin for 10 coins, which strikes Lydia with severe shock. Lydia suggests they go and confront those scammers immediately, but Milan hesitated for some reason. Milan explains the problem to Lydia, clarifying that it is difficult to transport food by land to the border because magical monsters are sensitive to the smell of grain and attack caravans, and the only place available to buy is the Count's province across the river. He adds that merchants refuse to even sell seeds or seedlings for planting, making obtaining them almost impossible. Lydia realizes these merchants are exploiting the situation, knowing border knights cannot challenge them, and she bites her thumb thinking about this greedy exploitation, wondering if the Count knows about this matter. Malin clarifies to Lydia via one of the knights that the Count always resides in the capital, but the agent managing the province definitely knows what is going on. Lydia wonders with astonishment about Count Mon being in the capital, for she doesn't recall seeing his face there before. Lydia concludes intelligently that if he didn't show his face in the high-class gatherings she attended, it is unlikely he is from a powerful family, and in short, his influence is much less than a Marquise family's influence. Her eyes shine with defiance, deciding it is time for Lady Evanchelle, the Marquise's daughter, to step to the forefront instead of the humble priestess. Lydia turns to the knights with a wide and enthusiastic smile, asking them who wants to accompany her to cause chaos and a dramatic scene in Count Monde's lands. A few days later, Lydia sits inside the carriage heading to the province and expresses her surprise to Arson sitting opposite her, saying she didn't expect him to accompany her himself too. Arson sits with dignity and calm, listening to her talk. He explains to her seriously that it would be annoying if harm befell her while in a strange land alone, adding that the Marquis, her father, would be extremely angry if he knew. Lydia laughs cheerfully, reminding him she won't be alone, as the rest of the knights are accompanying her too. Arson insists on his position, explaining that public security in that province is very bad due to the many merchant ships, mercenaries, and smuggling, so accompanying her is the safest option, warning her to be careful upon arrival. Lydia yawns indifferently and reassures him she won't wander alone. Then she smiles slyly and adds in a joking tone that it seems Marquis Randall also wanted very much to come, and it is a pity he couldn't, making Arson flinch in annoyance upon hearing the sarcastic title. Arson remembers when Lydia asked the knights aloud who wanted to accompany her to cause the scene Lydia planned. Everyone raised their hands with great enthusiasm, including Randall sneaking in from the back, and Lydia cheered happily seeing this activity and interaction from everyone. Arson decides to organize the group heading to the Count's province, explaining it would be difficult for everyone to leave the border at once, so only a few will go. He gestures towards his men, choosing his deputy Cedric and only 3 others to accompany them on this mission. He turns to them seriously, announcing that those 4 and he will go together, putting the movement plan into action. Arson returns to the present in the carriage and starts blaming himself internally, thinking there was no need to name people directly. He feels embarrassed by his behavior, wondering to himself if he is acting childishly towards his subordinates with this precise style of selection. He continues self-flagellation, wondering worriedly if Randall noticed this strange behavior of his, then stops for a moment, denouncing his thoughts and asking himself in astonishment what exactly Randall would notice. Lydia cuts his turbulent train of thought, asking him about the list she asked him to prepare earlier. Arson regains his balance and takes out a paper scroll, telling her he has already prepared it, so Lydia thanks him as she moves to take it. Lydia opens the scroll to be surprised by its immense length stretching to reach the floor, which strikes her with amazement at the volume of requests. Arson justifies the length of the list by the presence of many things to buy, explaining that damages were severe due to repelling magical monster attacks during his absence, which is unusual in such frequency. Lydia smiles confidently, folding the list, reassuring him that it is fine and they have enough funds to cover these expenses. She suddenly reveals to Arson a bag full of sparkling diamonds, displaying it before him proudly. Lydia laughs cheerfully, telling him it is too early to be surprised, because there is more up her sleeve. She takes out a nightgown from her bag and displays it before him, while Arson looks at her in shock and embarrassment at what he sees. Lydia explains cunningly that this is her father's emergency fund, hidden in the marquisate, where she sewed money and diamonds inside this fabric to smuggle it without her brother Devon's knowledge, pointing out maliciously that she told him it was expensive underwear to deflect suspicion. Arson's cheeks turn red with embarrassment as he covers his mouth, while Lydia continues her speech saying she must rip the rest of the fabric to extract what is inside, and Arson asks her if she is tired, so she says she is a little tired because she stayed up late doing that yesterday. Arson looks at her with tension and embarrassment, then extends his hand asking her to give him the fabric so he can do this task instead of her. Lydia is surprised and tries to object, but he interrupts her seriously, asking her to go to sleep because she will need all her energy to cause the dramatic scene she plans in the province tomorrow. Lydia smiles gratefully and agrees to his offer, saying she will close her eyes a little, thanking him with the title Marquis, and tells him she won't say anything even if he embezzles a piece or two for himself, but he tells her he will never do that. Lydia lies down and falls asleep quickly, while Arson looks at her sleeping peacefully. Arson sits alone in the carriage, holding the fabric and unpicking it to extract the diamonds, putting his hand on his head in despair, wondering to himself, what on earth am I doing? The group finally arrives at Wand Province, and the buildings and streets look more prosperous than they expected. Lydia wanders the market streets, noticing inns, restaurants, and even agricultural lands, thinking in amazement that the difference between this province and the border is just one river, yet living conditions are completely different. She tells herself the province is small but a hidden gem, and wonders how Count Wand possesses this level of wealth, yet she never heard of him before. She thinks to herself that this isn't important now, then calls for Merchant Milan. Lydia returns to her vitality and smiles confidently, suggesting going to the store first to start executing the plan. Lydia decides that for a full week, she will return to embodying the persona of the infamous Marquise's daughter Lydia, the spoiled, selfish, and stubborn girl. She explains the details of her plan, which relies on showing off and spending money lavishly, and spreading rumors that she is still financially supported by the Marquise family. She adds she will pretend to be an ignorant and spoiled girl, allowing merchants to scam her on purpose and buy things at double prices. She asserts enthusiastically that once the news reaches the agent in charge that she has appeared, she will cause a huge uproar and drag him out to confront her. Lydia leaves the store humming happily, thinking that Sir Arson's presence with her and following her will make executing this charade much easier. Lydia thinks to herself, walking beside Arson, that treating him as a mere attendant and dragging him behind her will make her look completely immature, and this will help spread the rumor that she fell madly in love with him. She adds that the first thing she needs to execute this is proper clothes, and one of the knights describes the place to her as the finest store in the province. Lydia announces enthusiastically activating the spoiled young lady mode and asks them to enter, while her features switch to arrogance and confidence. Lydia stops suddenly and looks at her shoes, then turns to Arson, who looks confused and uncomprehending. She asks him in a whisper to change his facial expressions and look like someone dragged here against his will. So Arson is surprised by that request. She approaches him and whispers sternly, saying she is telling him to show skillfully that he hates everything she does. Lydia sighs helplessly when she sees his inability to act, and tells him if it is difficult for him, just maintain a blank face. The store door opens and employees welcome them warmly. Lydia asks the employee for priest robes, so the employee apologizes, politely explaining they don't make priest robes in this store. The employee smiles, regretfully, but suddenly freezes in place with eyes wide in shock looking at Lydia when someone tells her she is Marquis of Anchel's daughter. The employee recalls in her mind the rumors she heard about the Marquis's daughter turning into a priestess and going to the border, wondering in astonishment why she is suddenly in this province. The employee screams inside in shock and confusion, while Lydia's displeased features appear, asking her sharply if they don't make clothes for priests. The employee denies that quickly. The employee realizes the situation quickly and tries to salvage it with flattery, saying loudly that of course they will make the robes with pleasure as long as the priestess herself has honored them with her arrival. While the female employees stand submissively, Lydia thinks with displeasure, wondering what they think of her, deciding she must order at least 3 sets to confirm her status. The employee starts praising Lydia's taste, confirming this is the finest store around, suggesting starting with choosing fabrics while employees show different samples. Lydia looks at the fabrics closely with a scrutinizing look. She rejects a fabric coldly, saying it is used for wedding dresses and demands its removal immediately, causing panic to the employee. She criticizes another piece, saying its color is too yellow, embodying the hard-to-please customer role skillfully. Her choice finally falls on a specific fabric, announcing coldly that this is acceptable. The employee claps her hands with exaggerated enthusiasm, praising the young lady's sharp eye and refined taste. The employee turns to Arson and the disguised knights, explaining to them condescendingly that this fabric is imported and the most expensive among what was shown. She begins describing the design she wants, suggesting adding some lace on the sleeves to look beautiful and some ruffles around the neck. Lydia wonders anxiously if this is too much for a priestess and fears people might talk about her extravagance. But the employee convinces her that adding a few details won't be noticed by anyone. Lydia asks in a loud and lively voice to add pearl embroidery around the collar to look elegant, while the employee continues praising her exceptional taste. The employees take measurements around Lydia, while she thinks happily that she didn't think about it this deeply before, but she thinks the result will look very classy. Lydia asks confidently if 1 week is enough to finish the work. The employee confirms enthusiastically that they will prepare it as fast as possible. Suddenly, the employee asks Lydia innocently about the maid accompanying Lydia, pointing out that the private maid usually handles payment matters, which lands Lydia in a bind. Lydia suddenly remembers the reality of her situation, wondering in astonishment, maid? Realizing the fatal mistake in her charade. The employee sweats and becomes very confused, as Lydia tells her a priestess cannot wander with a private maid, and the employees start stammering, looking for a way out. Lydia speaks to herself sarcastically, realizing no sane priest would embroider pearls on a religious robe in that exaggerated way. While she was drowning in playing her role, Arson was watching her from behind with a smile of admiration, admitting to himself her amazing skill in embodying the ignorant and naive girl forced into priesthood. Suddenly, Lydia turns to the employee, asking with feigned disapproval why she would need a maid in the first place, putting everyone in an awkward situation. Lydia signals with her hand quietly to Arson to save the situation. Arson wonders to himself if Lydia is asking him to pay now. Arson steps forward and places a huge diamond piece in the employee's hand for payment, while the employee's eyes bulge and she screams in shock and astonishment, unable to believe they are paying for 3 robes with a diamond piece. Lydia asks with fake innocence and coldness if there is any problem paying. The employee rushes to deny, stammering with overwhelming joy, screaming inside that she hit the jackpot. Lydia smiles slyly as she leaves, thinking that paying a much larger amount than required will ensure the rumor spreads by tomorrow about the arrival of a rich and naive girl easy to deceive. Indeed, her plan succeeded perfectly, for as soon as she went out, shop owners in the area started flocking to her, and despite her happiness with the plan's success, exhaustion began creeping up on her. Lydia walks in the street surrounded by knights loaded with bags, complaining in secret that too much walking has exhausted her completely. Walking becomes a heavy burden on Lydia, so she decides to seize the opportunity and the presence of people around her to move to the next part of the plan. She suddenly pretends to be dizzy and weak, letting out a faint scream to draw the attention of Arson, who looks at her questioningly. Lydia sits on the ground with a dramatic performance, complaining loudly about her leg pain and extreme exhaustion, then asks Arson boldly to carry her. Lydia laughs in secret, expecting him to refuse her request with strict and harsh features in front of everyone, to complete his role as a cold guard who hates her. But surprise ties her tongue when Arson bends down immediately and carries her in his arms with lightness and complete ease. Arson looks at her with worried and serious features, asking her with concern if she is very tired. Lydia stammers with her face blushing from shyness and shock, while screaming in her mind that this kind and affectionate behavior wasn't part of what she planned at all.